Hello,
Sure.
come one, come all to the Remembering Truth Star Wars character tier ranking podcast episode. The official tier ranking of all the Star Wars characters you know and love. And we have, can I say your name? Or
Yes.
Anthony Vella here. And he is going to be the co host for this episode.
Hello, viewer. Hello to whomever is watching. I'm Anthony Vella. I go by AJ, and I'm ready to get into a tier list with my buddy Patrick.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Yes, yeah, of course. And up next, we have starting strong. We have actually. Do you want to start with the strongest characters, or do you want to start with random characters?
We can start wherever, bro.
Okay, let's
I'm
do Anakin.
sure I have an opinion ready to go for
All right,
anyone.
let's go. One in the tank. All right, Anakin Skywalker.
Okay, so this is by strength, right? Not favorability.
This is by like how valuable they are to making the movie or the series memorable and important to you.
Gotcha.
So
Okay, Anakin Skywalker.
favorability is huge, but it's just not everything.
Sure. Favorability is definitely an all-encompassing trait when it
Yes.
comes to characters in movies, sequences in movies and TV.
Like
So
one
basically
great
all the
sequence,
elements that make up
one
a
great
character.
sequence can like make or break a character. And sometimes you have characters that are in so many of scenes that they, even though they're kind of a good character, it dilutes their importance because they're in too many scenes. So it's
Oh, okay.
there's
Yeah,
kind of like an engineering to it.
definitely. I agree.
All right.
It depends on how good the scenes are. It depends on the quality, but
So
absolutely right.
I'll take a stab at Anakin. I think Anakin was super whiny, super kind of plain faced. Hayden Christensen's acting slowed down anyone's appreciation for him. I think he had a lot of good sort of dastardly moments. His dialogue was never great. I don't necessarily view him as the linchpin for the prequels, but I do see how everything does kind of depend on him. So you do need Anakin to kind of he like is in so far that I think like the Emperor is probably even like a more consequential character in some ways. I think Anakin, you can't deny that he is kind of the skeleton for the prequels. So that's being said, I think the prequels weren't the best of all the movies, and I think that skeleton wasn't optimal. What letter grade would you give Anakin?
So, based on everything you just said, actually, I want to hear where you would put Anakin because you gave him a lot of negative. So,
Okay,
where are you going to
from
put him?
S down to F, I would put him at low B. I'll give him like a B minus, maybe a C plus.
Definitely. All right. So, in my opinion, I love the prequels. I grew up with them. They are definitely very flawed, but it's authentic, original George Lucas Star Wars, and you're either going to love or hate that. In my opinion, I think Anakin is definitely S tier in my opinion, just because of how fond I am of those movies. I think if you get past some of the janky dialogue, because it's kind of like, it can definitely be wooden sometimes, but like a lot of the time, but
Yeah.
sometimes like it's like also funny, first of all. Second of all, it reveals important information. So George is definitely revealing character motivation within the dialogue. So there is purpose to it, even though it might be a little wooden, stunted. And I think that on top of Anakin's delivery, well, let's just say so for Anakin's delivery, that's fine. But in the greater context of all six movies, which is what I was going to get to, was is that he is kind of you're right. He is the skeleton and the structure of the prequels, and I think there's a lot of good world building that surrounds him. And he definitely and becoming Darth Vader and the original six movies being about the story of Darth Vader. I think not only is Anakin serviceable and in the pure authentic vision of George Lucas, I think in Revenge of the Sith, which I consider the best Star Wars movie, despite prequel flaws, with how epic and grandiose the storytelling is, I think Anakin is able to be elevated to a level of complexity and nuance that exists within Star Wars. So I think Anakin does achieve the complexity and nuance that Star Wars can achieve, like at the top level. And I think, in my opinion, you just got to kind of open yourself up to it and give it a chance, and really invest in what George Lucas is trying to show, even if it can be a little wonky or janky. And since I fell for it and completely believe in George Lucas, what they showed me with Anakin was really great. I love Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace too. I go crazy for those movies. I get them completely. So, in my opinion, I definitely put Anakin at S, especially because he becomes Darth Vader and is the linchpin for all 6 movies.
So you put him in
But
S.
I put him in S tier, absolutely, even
Okay.
with all the flaws and everything. But I understand bringing him down a few
So let's
tiers.
like let's
Absolutely.
compromise. Do you want to put him in A?
I think I struggle even to put him in A because I really do appreciate Anakin and Hayden Christensen that much, but I think A really works for me. Just on a macro level, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, you've definitely given me more appreciation for his role. I definitely, after what you said, I don't know if I would still call him a B minus, but I still don't think he's my favorite character or necessarily the most important character, because remember, Darth Vader, I think we're going to review him separately in this.
Yep, sounds good.
Yeah, we
And
are.
even with Darth Vader being reviewed separate, I still put Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker in S for me.
Okay.
But I understand the drawbacks to bring him even to A. But
Great.
I think he should be up there for what he represents in the full context of Star Wars, if you really want to invest yourself in it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, up next, the counterpart in many respects to Anakin, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Young
I don't think
Obi-Wan
we have
Kenobi.
to explain this one. Okay, you want to? Oh yeah, okay. Before Alec Guinness in the original movie, I don't think we have to go that deep into as many explanations as we had to for Hayden. I mean, I think this might be an easy S tier.
Okay, Obi-Wan is he has a lot better dialogue. And it's partly because he's drawing on a tradition from the first 3 movies, so that there's sort of more that was already, stock and trade in his character before he even had to be written down. And then Obi-Wan is also he's the constant good guy, so that is also structural, skeletal. I think they did a really good job sort of defining his appearance as this sort of like British kind of, foppish, gentleman. I think that was not super expected, going off of just the Alec Guinness character. And then in the prequels, they made him a lot more of like of a firebrand. And he also, he does this interesting thing in the first prequel where he has to avenge his master who dies, and that really showed that he could like transform and change. Whereas I think in the prequels, Alec Guinness's character never really changed that much. But Obi-Wan definitely changes a lot in the prequels, almost as much as Anakin, and I think that really spells out how rich he was as a defining character in the movies. I would give him an A or an S. Yeah.
Yeah, someone who, for you, I think from what I'm hearing from you, for someone who might not give the prequels as much credit, which makes perfect sense. I think they
I
should
like them.
be.
No, I'm
I
a,
think,
I'm a bigger fan than
and,
it might sound like.
and clearly you do appreciate them in many respects. So on top of all the prequel appreciation and for how well defined he was throughout all of the movies, and the fact that you can take away that subtext from just the prequels alone, yeah, the way you described it is plenty of perfect reasons for S tier. Absolutely.
Okay, S tier. Up next, let's do random because we're just this list put like all of like the top 10 characters at the very height. So let's just call out a character and then I'll go for it.
Oh, okay. Good idea. Good. Could I do Disney era?
We're
Could
not
I
doing
do
Disney. We're just doing the
original movies?
six
Gotcha.
original. Yeah.
Okay. What about C3PO?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Good one. Good one. Which
Yeah,
do you mean the original trilogy one or the
he's the same in all six, so
okay,
just take it.
we can do both. I would say C3PO is a very good character because he's like Data from Star Trek. He's entirely comic relief, even though he is also kind of structural, like or sorry, not structural. He's kind of ornamental. Like he kind of he can be like he can kind of explain the obvious when the obvious needs to be explained plainly. But then he's also just a funny looking machine. So he just everything about him kind of has like this ambiguous purpose. And that makes it a more original character than a lot of characters on this list. There's not a lot of android like characters in fantasy, science fiction, space fantasy. There's not really that many that are like personable and sympathetic. And C3PO always does that. He's always sympathetic. So I think he's probably a B or an A. I wouldn't put him in S just because he's a little bit, extra as a character. But I do think he's up there. He's at the higher tiers.
I completely agree with you. The way you described C3PO, you described him in some certain ways that um, I hadn't considered, especially with him being an anomaly of, an android character. And I don't watch Star Trek, and you just gave some context for what a character in that show could represent, and how some of the characters in Star Wars can represent the same kinds of things. And of course, Star Wars is definitely more iconic, um, equally iconic, maybe a little bit more. Star Trek and
I think
Star
Star
Wars are
Wars
always
is far
fighting
more
for it.
iconic than Star Trek, but the Data character
Definitely.
is probably the most famous analog to C3PO that I can think of.
Absolutely. So with what you were describing, I think I was gonna knock C3PO for just being, a little annoying sometimes, and then I was gonna give him more
Oh,
credit
we can knock
because
him. We can knock him for sure. Do you want to? I
well,
mean,
now based on what you said and described, I think him being an anomaly of an android character and how well represented he was and how cool of an idea he was from the get go,
yeah,
like a
yeah.
human being, the way that C3PO is, just the design alone should be very, very notable credit, on top of being a linchpin in the. I was going to give him credit before I was listening to your ideas. I was going to give him credit for being kind of one of the linchpins in the original movie, definitely giving the audience that grounding sense, giving a character to latch onto when the original movie came out, and
Yeah,
all those audience were
and
exposed to the world for the first time.
when they made him the creation of Anakin in the prequels, it really like it was a very effective way to make him relevant. And he didn't there was no real like tie-in to the prequels, or so we thought. And then he immediately was like this childhood project of Anakin Skywalker, and that
I
made him
didn't
so much
consider
more
that,
relevant.
but I think a lot of people think of that as like, a little bit unnecessary and a little bit forced. And I can see where those people are coming from. I'm definitely indifferent on on that debate.
Okay.
So based on every other thing and I think his iconic status in the original movies definitely puts him above that debate of him being made by like Darth Vader. So I'm gonna give him a ton of credit, and I don't think he's S tier, but and I think the argument could be made for S tier for how iconic he is in the first place. But let's just put him at A because he's not Obi-Wan
Okay,
Kenobi.
I'll put how about this? I'll put the original in A and then the prequels one in B.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. If you want to divide him like that, then perfect.
All right, now name another character.
You know what? I could put prequel C3PO in lower.
Yeah,
Definitely
how
put him
about
lower.
C? How about C?
Put him in. You can put him in D if you
C,
want.
okay,
he didn't.
all right,
He
okay,
didn't do anything in those
all
movies.
right.
Only if you
The
agree.
first negative character. I like it. All right.
Okay.
How about okay? Go for it. Yeah, there's a whole list here.
Let's do. Hmm,
By the way, there are some characters from the Disney movies actually.
sounds good. Sounds good. Let's just do. Let's just do Han Solo.
Really, right out of the gate? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, this one's got to be S. He's the only one who had like a movie, a spin-off movie for himself. The actor is obviously the most famous actor in the whole Yeah, in the whole series.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd say Harrison Ford is probably the most.
Probably the most famous actor. He's got an incredible speaking voice. He's weirdly enough, he's sort of the straight man character. Like he has almost no humorous personality, and he's also not necessarily the most effective character because he does get kind of endangered at times. He provides the Millennium Falcon, so he's a little controversial. Like he gets kidnapped by Vader. He's a little controversial, but he also is kind of he represents a little bit of humanity in the original trilogy. And unfortunately, he's not in the prequels, so he can't comment on that. But I think he is one of the most human characters in.
Fun fact for the audience: George Lucas wanted to put a young Han Solo in the prequels,
Okay.
and they cut that idea. But that's
Well,
just an
do you know who
interesting
cut
tidbit.
it or why? Or
George Lucas, yeah, George Lucas was like, no, there's no time, it doesn't fit.
oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
He was
where's
gonna put it in the Kashyyyk sequence. Okay, so for Han Solo, definitely he has that iconic status in the original movie. Um, Everyone associates Star Wars with Han Solo. I think he represents the everyman, and I think the everyman, him being vulnerable, is definitely a benefit to him as a character and how good he is as a character. And I think he's pretty much the same throughout the original trilogy. He's the same type of character, and I think him being vulnerable in The Empire Strikes Back, I don't think that added to his character. I mean, it's good having vulnerability is good. I think it added to the story, and I think having the stakes of Han Solo being used in that way was very good. And in the sixth movie, in the Return of the Jedi, in the last movie, he was kind of supposed to die in The Empire Strikes Back, and Harrison Ford wanted to kill him off, but George Lucas wanted to keep him alive. So basically, Han Solo really didn't have that much to do in Return of the Jedi. He just kind of like is very silly and does a few things and fights with the Ewoks, and that's about it. He gets rescued and then he fights with Ewoks, so he doesn't have a lot of credit in the Return of the Jedi. But I think the iconic status of immediate brand association, what he represents as the everyman in Star Wars, he
yes,
definitely
yeah.
he heralds in new other everyman characters
I
for
do
new Star
think
Wars content.
I do think that if we were basing this just on Revenge of Return of the Jedi, he would probably be a mid-tier character
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he's not
yeah.
really in
But
Revenge.
I think separating, I think his iconic status
Overall, yeah, no, I mean
puts him,
that's
yeah.
how like that just goes to show that like even like a movie that like sort of lowers him, he can only do so much harm.
Right. And they made that spin-off movie for him, and it wasn't super successful. It was kind of a flop on Disney's part, and they stopped making spin-off movies because of it. It was an okay movie, and I think it doesn't hurt or add to his character at all. I think it just is nothing. So his iconic status in those original movies is kind of unmatched. So we got to put him in some higher tiers, absolutely.
Great, yeah, I put him in S. I put him right next to Obi-Wan,
I
the
think
young Obi-Wan.
I think S is good. Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
All right, next character. Who else? Feel free to
Really
go
putting
for
me on the really putting me on the spot again.
feel free to
I don't
go
want
for
to
some
pick.
weird ones, man, because I know
I
there's
I guess we could just go for let's not get super weird right now because we've been doing like the all the iconic ones. So let's slowly like go down the list. So let's go to Boba Fett, kind of a middle of the road character.
oh, good choice, good
I
choice. Yeah,
yes, in the original
controversial.
movies throughout all Star
This
Wars.
is this one has some of the biggest cult status. People that really like Star Wars fan fiction love Boba Fett. Um, and he's also the coolest looking character, I think. Maybe even more than Vader. In the whole series. Darth
What do you think?
Maul is up there too.
Do you think? What do you think? Boba or Darth Vader for cooler luck? What do you got?
For cooler look.
Yeah,
Um, Vader by a hair. By a
I
hair.
think Vader too. I think Vader
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't beat the dark,
No.
overpowering look.
No, you cannot. We will get to Vader eventually.
Boba Fett looks a little like a soldier, kind of. Like, I mean, he is a soldier of fortune, but he also just kind of looks like he's in the army in some funny capacity. He kind of doesn't.
Hmm.
He's cool, almost like despite himself. Like if he didn't have that visor, like image, like which I think is only character in those early movies to have that. That sort of horizontal eye visor or whatever, the lens.
He was the only one that had. Oh, the one that hangs off his helmet,
No,
like kind of like.
he has an I guess it's like glasses or whatever. It's like for his helmet. Yeah, the his he has a
He has
horizontal.
basically like a little antenna sticking up on the top of his helmet. You're saying, and he pulls it down and puts it in front of his.
No, I
Well,
mean
of course,
that's
it's the. Of
no,
course,
no.
we're talking about the
I just mean his
Mandalorian helmet.
goggles. I guess he has like his helmet and
You're talking about
goggles.
the helmet. You're talking about the helmet in general, right?
Yeah,
The
the helmet in
Mandalorian
general,
helmet.
the goggles, the eye sockets or whatever are like horizontal and like rectangular, and that was. I don't know if there's other characters in the original movies that
In
had that.
the original movies, Boba Fett was the only one with what we now know as a Mandalorian helmet.
That's right. Now we know his Mandalorian helmet, so that kind of put him in a league of his own. And obviously, he doesn't have that many lines, but that kind of benefits him. And he's very. I think my favorite scene with him was where he 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 threatened with the grenade in Jabba's palace.
Yep, that's cool.
That
Wait, no, that wasn't him. That wasn't him.
that wasn't him.
That was Princess Leia in a bounty
Oh,
hunter suit, and
yeah,
Boba Fett pulled his gun on her.
that's right. Right.
So yeah.
Oh yeah, well this is the thing. In the original trilogy, he wasn't extremely like action packed. Like he was kind of a looming figure like Vader. So I think in the extended universe he's way more interesting for sure. In the actual movies, if we're going strictly on the actual movies, I don't think I could make him an A character because
Me neither.
he's not involved enough. And then
No.
B, maybe a B because he's very noticeable. I'll give him a B minus maybe.
He has iconic status. Definitely, everyone can associate Star Wars with Boba Fett. Not as much as some of the other ones, but he is one of the most famous things to ever come out of Star Wars. Hence, why the Mandalorian exists. And in The Empire Strikes Back, he didn't do anything except take Han Solo. And then in Return of the Jedi, of course, we finally got to get to the fact that he got killed like a punk. He got taken out of that movie by a blind Han Solo,
He fell into the
and he
Sarlacc
and he
pit.
fell he fell into the Sarlacc until Disney brought him back to life, and that
Well,
show was
apparently
completely
he never
mid,
actually
pretty bad,
died. He
honestly.
fought his way out, but you don't see
Exactly.
that in
In
the movie.
Disney's Book of Boba Fett, it's not in the original movies, but and honestly, if just a quick aside for the Book of Boba Fett, that show's totally mid, honestly, mostly bad. So
Okay. Yeah.
so separate
I,
from that, we're looking at Boba Fett in the original trilogy and the impact that left on his status as a character. So he gets killed really easily in Return of Jedi because
he's a
George Lucas didn't
paper
know how
tiger,
famous he
right? You
was.
know that term, paper tiger?
Glass cannon.
He's a glass
Yeah.
cannon. Yeah, he just kind
Yeah.
of you kind of expected more from him in the original trilogy, and
He kind of became a nothing burger. Yeah, kind of a
yeah,
waste.
I know.
So a waste, but an iconic character nonetheless.
I still
Very
give him a
memorable.
B minus. I think you kind of
Let's give
need
him a
him
B.
to make the
Give him a
story
B.
more interesting, just even if it's mostly visual.
Yep. Yep. I'd say
Okay.
B. That's good.
What else? Who else?
So let's go Django Fett. Let's go to a prequel character.
Oh,
Just the
honestly,
opposite side of the
Django
coin.
Fett, I might even like him more. I
I
might.
think we would put Django in the same tier, but let's put him maybe above. But I don't know. Boba Fett is the reason Django Fett exists for that iconic helmet, the
The
design.
Mandalorian look, yes.
All right.
The yeah, I always think of the Mandalorian look from one of the video games, so which is different from the ones in the movies in the TV show. But
Oh, you're talking about like the Neo Crusaders from Knights of the Old Republic and stuff?
yeah, they just look different. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
said.
they look a little bit different. Yep, yep.
Um,
Inspired by the same, but yeah.
and this is the thing is that Jango Fett, he had more. You saw his actual face. He had a greater speaking role. Effectively, he kind of is overblown because all the stormtroopers end up looking like him too, or the clones at least, and so he's kind of like a larger than himself character in a way. Like he bleeds out.
Right. Yeah, yeah. What his character represents kind of dilutes what he actually is, like his actual character.
Yeah, and
Is
then
that
and
what you're
his
saying?
actual
Because
character
I think
had
that.
what like one or two scenes that were spoken, and then
He had a few. He had a couple. He had like
Mostly
a
on
few
that
scenes in that
on
movie.
Naboo, right? Well, not Naboo.
Camino.
That's the one. Yeah, that's a Spanish word for like avenue or whatever. It's like a funny. It's funny
Oh,
that they
cool.
would use that
Camino's one
name
of the
for
best
planet.
planets in Star Wars. It's an amazing planet. The ideas of the clones are incredible.
I like
It,
Camino. I think it made the second Attack of the Clones one of my favorite movies for sure. It was just the what Camino was as a phenomenon, and then what so for him I would give him he
I think
dies
I
like
want to
he
put him
also
behind.
kind of dies like a bitch too, like he gets killed by Mace Windu
At least
handedly.
he gets killed by like one of the strongest Jedi.
He
At
gets
least he
killed
has
and
that
but
going.
he does it's weird because he gets killed in an arena in front of a bunch of people, like he gets killed.
Yeah, he got pretty embarrassed. He got pretty embarrassed. So maybe we can throw him down to C because Boba Fett gets the credit for having the iconic status. I think we
Boba
can put
Fett is
Django in
almost like
C.
a Jango Fett's kind of a victim of his own success in a way because he had to get carted around as the clone, inspiration or whatever. He had to get
Clone template.
clone template,
Yes.
right? Yes, he had to get carted around, and then he had to actually, show force, and he kind of floundered. Whereas Boba Fett it was more understated, and that allowed him.
And did the same thing, but has the iconic original trilogy status that created Jango Fett in the first place.
Yeah, but not let alone status. I mean, he also just in those movies he looked more of reasonable in a sense because he wasn't showboating as much.
Yes, and I think that was I think that added to the mystery of the original trilogy and how the world was so unexplored at the time.
A little more
And
virtue, a
and
little
then
more virtuous,
yeah,
I think. Yeah. Okay,
I
so
think I think comparing him to like for example, like we were talking about how C-3PO is like an anomaly in that an android character is very unique, and C-3PO's design is very unique. I think Boba Fett is just a guy in armor.
yeah,
And the armor's iconic and one of the coolest armors ever in
and he's
pop
not a
culture.
clone. I always forget he's not actually a clone. Oh no, he was a clone.
He's technically a clone.
He's slow. He's a slow growing clone. And then
Yeah.
the Jango Fett also didn't like Boba Fett had minimal dialogue, but his dialogue was always effective. Fett had a good amount of dialogue, and it wasn't memorable at all.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's
Yeah.
just a lot of reasons to sort of throw him down as a diluted character. I kind of wish I had more to say about it, but they're really that's what they are, B and C.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
who
I got
next?
another one. I got another in the chamber. So let's go Lando Calrissian.
Lando Calrissian. Oh, classic. This guy is such a '70s like sort of funkadelic looking dude. Billy D. Williams played this Lando Calrissian, and he
One
had
of the smoothest guys.
yeah, he was kind of he looks genuine. Oh, he's one of the most genuine, appealing characters or appearing characters in Star Wars. I don't know. Obviously, it's a facade. He ends up betraying one of his best friends or one of his friends or whatever, betraying Han Solo, and he kind of is pivotal for that Empire Strikes Back. What is the second? The third act. He kind of led into the. I think it was the second or third act that he just broke into when he sold out Han Solo. So that whole movie was kind of defined by his betrayal. Um, and what do you think of him though as a personality? Do you think he holds his own, or do you think it
He
was
is.
mostly just a mechanical character?
So I think he definitely has iconic status. I think he definitely is a mechanical character, but at the same time has a lot of personality traits and is mostly well defined. But so I think and it great for diversity in the original Star Wars movies to have a black character. I mean, they had James Earl Jones too, but he's like talking. He's behind a microphone and you never see him. So Lando betrays the heroes. There's a little bit of setup for it. It definitely makes The Empire Strikes Back very compelling and very good. Him changing his mind was great for his character. So I think if we were just looking at Empire Strikes Back in a vacuum, I'd say we could put him at A. But so as opposed to Han Solo, whose iconic status doesn't get dragged down at all by his his appearance in Return of the Jedi. I think Lando in Return of the Jedi actually doesn't make any sense because, and he doesn't do that much either. Where Han Solo was wasted in Return of the Jedi, and his character rises above that with his iconic status. I think Lando has iconic status, but it doesn't quite rise above how much he wasn't in Return of the Jedi, and I think a lot of people kind of forget Lando when they think of Star Wars. I don't think he's as iconic as
Yeah, I
Han Solo, so
absolutely
I'm going to
agree.
knock him down a few tiers.
I absolutely agree. He's iconic in like a quirky way. He's not legitimately iconic. I think he's a C. I think he could kind of go both ways as sort of an extra character or as a defining, well scripted sort of charming character. That's
When
because
he was well written in Empire Strikes Back, but wasting him in Return of the Jedi and having his personality make no sense in Return of the Jedi. When Han Solo meets him again in Return of the Jedi, they become best friends immediately, even though the last thing Lando did was betray them. Even though he helped again, I mean, Han Solo wouldn't. They forgot about that in the writing, and I think that makes the dynamics weird in Return of the Jedi, and also Lando just isn't in Return of the Jedi that much, even though he's in that
I
final space
think when I
battle.
was a kid, I liked his character more because I didn't understand the impact of being betrayed so much. And as an
Yeah, me
adult, I
too.
think looking back, I'm like, wow, that guy kind of was like a weird character because he betrayed Han, kind of just viciously, ruthlessly. And then later on, he just sort of like sheds one tear, joins up on like the escape, mission, and then he's like immediately forgiven.
Just
And
a little bit of a messy character and not as iconic as Han Solo, so the messiness drags him down a bit. And he doesn't do that much either. All he does is shoot a blaster. He's
Yeah,
not
I
as
mean, he
noteworthy.
definitely looked funny when he was wearing that helmet at Jabba's palace. I mean, I still remember that fondly, but I can't give him more than a C, unfortunately. C plus.
Sorry, Lando fans. I'm gonna put
All
Lando
right,
at
who's
C.
next?
Let's go with the original trilogy. Chewbacca. Let's run Chewbacca. Let's do
Oh,
it.
one of my favorites. I actually, I probably told you this, but I went to a signing of for the actor, um,
Peter
and
Mayhew.
Peter Mayhew, right? Yeah, and
Rest in
I was
peace.
gonna spend all the money I had as a teenager, all my allowance money on an autograph. But then he had a sign that says like "Do not stare at me," like it's impolite. Like he was telling off his fans, and I was like, all right, well, I just kind of walked away. I was like, I don't. There wasn't even a line, like
He was rude. You're saying?
yeah, he was just kind of rude, like standoffish, and I'm like, all right, well, like I mean, I kind of regret it
Oh,
now,
that's interesting.
but
That's interesting. That's very funny. Well, what the heck, Peter Mayhew in the grave? Not cool. Why don't you
I have yeah,
respect your fans a little bit more?
I have like a not very fully formed Peter Mayhew story, but at least I have one, and now he's dead, so it's fucked.
Rip, rip.
Yeah,
Never forget. Never
I wish I
forget.
got that autograph. It would have been worth it.
Well, maybe in
So
another Star Wars actor.
Chewbacca though, we're not here to talk about Peter Mayhew, really. Chewbacca is
Yeah,
what
no.
matters.
That opinion on Peter Mayhew is separate from our review of Chewbacca.
I think this is like the good guy Boba Fett. He's in he. The only difference is that he talks less than Boba Fett, but he makes a lot more noises. He's guttural. He can communicate in an animalistic kind of way that somehow is effective because he's sentient. And I think he's a better character than Boba Fett, but I don't know if he's extremely better than Boba Fett. I just think he's in so many scenes, and he doesn't dilute any of the scenes. You'll notice none of the scenes he's in does he make them worse, as far as I can remember. And he's in a
You're
lot
right.
of the movies,
Yep.
so he might be an A minus or B plus. What do you think?
So I want to put him in B because yes, he's super iconic. Everyone recognizes Chewbacca pretty much, but having if you're Chewbacca and this is not Chewbacca's fault and he's still an amazing character, but he's not really a character. He doesn't have any character traits. All you can pin on him is that he has loyalty to Han Solo, and I think if you want to look at Star Wars as a whole, You'll
It's that
forget about
Wookiee life debt.
Chewbacca. You'll remember Chewbacca as like an iconic Star Wars thing if you're just kind of thinking if you're a mainstream person and like you hear about Chewbacca. But if you like watch Star Wars for all the characters and stuff, I think you're gonna forget more about Chewbacca just because he's not a character. He's just he's more of a prop. He's more of an accessory. So I
Yeah,
think, and
absolutely.
I love him to death, but yeah, I don't think he's
He's
on.
almost
I just
inanimate
don't think he's
as a
18.
personality, and the other thing is that he he has this really like talk about strange personality. He has this Wookiee life debt that is not really that well exposed, or there's not a lot of exposition on it. But
Right,
they
we don't know a lot of the culture. That would
well,
be
apparently he
interesting.
has this Wookiee life debt, and so he's loyal to Han Solo for reasons that are always left murky. So, like
In
Lando
the Han Solo
Calrissian,
spinoff movie,
what? Oh yeah.
in the Han Solo spinoff movie, they
Well,
explain that.
well, they explain it in a lot of situations, I think. But I definitely think in the movies he seems in the original six he seems like Lando. He's a combination, a sense of Lando and Boba Fett
And
because
his character is less inconsistent because all he has to do is growl and be
he's a
cool. And
combination of C-3PO, Lando, and Boba Fett. He has the consistency of C-3PO. He has the voicelessness of Boba Fett and the coolness, and then he has the sort of weird character trait that is kind of he's an enigma, like Lando Calrissian.
he
So
does a lot too. He does a lot too.
yeah, but I think B is good because I did say that he didn't ruin any scene he was in, but I also think that maybe there are some scenes that if you weren't in it, they could have been better. So yeah, I give him a B, but a B plus.
You know what? Based on the things you said, I think we can put Chewbacca in A tier
Okay, A minus.
because okay.
All right, up next, I'll pick one. How
Yes,
about
go ahead.
Admiral Akbar?
Oh yeah, awesome. Okay. In my opinion, we could put Admiral Akbar in C tier. He was he was iconic in Return of the Jedi and really gave the Rebel Alliance some very memorable leadership,
He was
and
everything
it
Lando
built the
Calrissian
world
couldn't
well.
be. He was everything that Lando couldn't be. He was loyal to the rebels. He died valiantly. In a self on it. Drowned in his own ship. He
He was a diversity because
did he
he's a fish
die?
person in Star
Wait,
Wars.
did he get killed? Diverse.
In the sequel trilogy, which isn't canon.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, so he Admiral Akbar is he was the he was really old. They tried to make him like his skin look different, and because
No, he wasn't. He wasn't in any scenes. He looked the exact same, and then he died pretty much off
okay,
screen. It was pretty embarrassing. It was
it's a
honestly
trap.
really awful. It
Yeah,
was
he got
disrespectful.
trapped. I'll tell you that much. He got trapped in those shitty movies.
Oh, true that, my man. So did everyone that was in that movie was trapped.
So he's bittersweet
Stupid
though because
Hollywood
he
contracts.
honestly he was a little too quirky. He could have been in more scenes and as an experiment at least, and he wasn't, and that's disappointing. So I guess I can put it at C.
Right, I think if he was just standing up and if he like walked on Endor and like made his presence more known, I think he would have been more notable and iconic for the Star Wars movies as a whole. But he filled his role well in Return of the Jedi, and he was very cool and well designed. The fish people are weird in
And
Star Wars, but
no matter what
very
we think of
interesting.
him, he was an admiral. So the
So
popularity aside,
you gotta give him
he
accolades.
he had that.
Gotta give him
Yeah,
accolades.
he was
So what do you
good.
think?
I give him. I still think C plus. C
C's
plus.
good. C plus. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
Up
I
next,
like it.
we got some interesting ones. Oh, how about you go for one?
You have some interesting ones, so you get the next
Okay. Okay. Jeez. Kit Fisto. We're doing the fish people.
one. S tier.
S tier. Oh, okay.
Man,
Are you for real?
goat, epic green lightsaber, great design, great Jedi. In the Clone Wars episode, he is
Kit
a
Fisto,
goat. And I
man.
know we're not talking about the Clone Wars episodes right now, but since I have that context and I see this man
Uh,
just doing the best job he can as a Jedi, I give him full S. But
In the expanded
aside
universe,
from,
he was
uh,
great.
as- aside from me being obsessed with Kit Fisto and how much of a goat he is, he had no character in the 6 movies, and he got killed like a chump by the Senate, Darth Sidious. So, I guess I really can't give him any more than like C. Unfortunately, if
Um,
I wanted to be super biased and uh, and use it, I would put him in S tier. But I got to be realistic, and I'm gonna
See,
put him
yeah,
in.
real. I mean, honestly, I was willing to let you do it for a second, but he can't. He had one scene that was really substantial in Revenge of the Sith, where he tried to help
Windu,
Mace Windu, right, defeat with some other people, some other Jedi Masters, defeat
Agen
Palpatine.
and 1710.
Yeah, it was.
Those were the
I forget their names, but it wasn't. It wasn't. The other ones. I don't think the other ones are even on this list.
no,
I
they're
know their
not, but they're
faces.
named characters. They're named characters in Star Wars. They're Agen, Kolar, and Sassian Tin. They're 2 Jedi goats.
They
Doing
are
their best
goats.
to stop
Yes.
the Sith.
That's yeah.
Failed completely. But
Yeah, and
they
Kit
tried.
Fisto, I think he was the first to die, actually.
No, he was the last. He
No, he was the
lasted the
last.
longest.
Okay, well that's better. Yeah, I mean, he was just he kind of he kind of was a prop effectively, which is
He
sad
also
because he really deserved more. I mean, even Coyote Mundi had like a full scene just for him, you know.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
But he was a Jedi Council member, so there is that.
Yeah, gotta give him respect for that.
Okay, I'll give him a
I give
C.
him, yeah, we give him C respect. If we don't have respect for our character, then they're below C. But I think having respect for him, so it's C.
Okay.
Um, how about next we do Windu, Mace Windu.
Oh, good call. Good call.
What do you think? What do you think?
I will say where's obviously he's like an S or an A. I mean he's up there. Like
Mhm.
he did kind of die in an awkward standoff, but it was very prolonged and moving. And in the Clone Wars he had a fair amount of action in the Clone Wars. He wasn't in that many movies, but he was always memorable. Obviously Samuel L. Jackson. That's actually probably the most famous actor in Star Wars, really. Um, I mean, possibly at one point Ewan McGregor, but I think Samuel L. Jackson has to be the most famous actor from Star Wars,
Yeah, I
and
think you're right.
he's a hell of an actor. Um,
The dialogue was a little stunted, but cool nonetheless.
yeah, his dialogue was never that good, but he didn't blow it when he did the fight. You know, he was like, oh, he's too powerful to be left alive. That was kind of a good line. It's the only
And
line that
don't forget he fought in the Geonosis battle too in the arena, and that was very cool.
well,
People
he
forget
killed
he kills Jango Fett,
Jango Fett. Yeah,
like we
no,
were
I
talking about.
mean,
Yeah.
they kind of gave him a lot of these like easy wins, but then they made it sort of more poignant by having him die like kind of like a bitch when he was zapped by lightning.
Yes,
And
I think that Mace Windu ultimately represented the failure of what the Jedi had become.
the Jedi
And
Order is
if you watch the prequels and the Jedi closely, then you will see that the way that they conduct
overly
their business
conservative,
is very
reactionary.
flawed.
Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think
rigid.
he gets more credit for representing how bad the Jedi were, and I think that's a testament to how complex some of the ideas were in the prequels, even if they weren't always executed in
And
the
the
best
word
way
is out that
possible.
he survived the his death scene.
Star Wars has revived too many people, and now since Disney is calling the shots, it's kind of it's very controversial as to whether you should buy into someone from the original George Lucas movies making a return. Some
But
people don't even
In the Disney
acknowledge.
franchise, he is supposedly back in some way.
No, not
Oh,
yet.
okay, okay. Well, I'll give
No.
him an A. I would give him an S maybe if he had like a if he had some sort of slight return in a in one of the Disney films or the Disney Plus shows, but because he hasn't had any kind of return, I have to keep him at A, which is still
Yeah,
pretty good.
yeah. Mace Windu Jedi A. We're doing it. We're giving Mace Windu an A. It's awesome. I love Windu. He's my profile picture on Steam.
That what was the name of his personal fighting style that was more aligned with the Sith than other fighting saber styles? It's called Vadak.
It was called Vapod.
Vapod. Right. Okay.
Form 7.
Form 7. Yes, exactly. Okay. Next up, how about that Twi'lek character who's Jabba's right hand man?
You mean like the dancing slave?
No, the guy that kind of betrays Jabba, but he works for him.
Oh, Bib Fortuna. Bib Fortuna.
Bib Fortuna, yes. Bib Fortuna.
So I like all the alien designs in Return of the Jedi. I think it turns a nonsensical plot into something very interesting and very engaging. I think if you're watching Star Wars and you're really invested in those movies, by the time you get to the Return of the Jedi, I think all those alien creatures and designs really create a great atmosphere, and I think he's a good representation of the atmosphere that aliens in Star Wars can create. But he didn't do that much, and Return of the Jedi was still a wonky movie anyway. I think he has a lot of positives going for him, but not enough positives to put him anything above a C tier.
As an ornamental character, he's definitely like an A or an S. However, as a well-rounded character, he's pretty relevant. I would say I'd say D.
The only reason I would give him C is because of the atmosphere that he was able to create for
Yeah,
the
no,
beginning of the
he's
movie.
definitely like he's the creature from the Black Lagoon. You know, he looks like a monster, and then in that atmosphere and that sequence, you needed all the characters to sort of be monsters, but they had to be their own monsters, and he was an individualized monster, which was kind of cool. He betrayed Jabba, and so he had a mind of his own, which was kind of
No,
a
he
nice
didn't
touch.
betray Jabba. He didn't betray Jabba.
No, he didn't. Who
No.
betrayed Jabba?
Nobody. Nobody betrayed Jabba. Lando gave him the slip. Luke and the gang gave him the slip, but no one really betrayed Jabba.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know why I thought that. No, he. Oh, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? In the expanded universe, he had plans to kill Jabba.
I gotcha.
That was what it
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
that's Legends. Yeah.
that's legend. Yeah, but he had plan. He was going to kill Jabba in his own head.
Well, he's great for, and you know what I think we should start considering too is how some characters are great for expanded universe material, and they lend.
A lot of the C
Uh,
characters are exactly like that. Actually, I've noticed.
who else is in C?
We have
Jango Fett.
Jango Fett,
Jango
Lando
Jango Fett is
Calrissian.
great. Jango Fett is amazing for spin-off content and for inspiring stories with that character. Lando's great for inspiring more stories with him. Great foundation of a character. It's just
Admiral
how they were
Akbar
used
is
in the
C.
movies.
Kit Fisto is
Admiral
C.
Kid Fisto, absolutely, definitely. In the saga, you just don't have time to explore those characters, but I think we can give them a lot of credit for
Yeah, honestly,
opening up the Star Wars universe outside of the
The best
movies.
thing about Star Wars isn't even the technology that's displayed. It's really the character variety and intensity. It's
Absolutely,
you don't get to see that in
absolutely.
any other show. And even like science fiction or really far out fantasy, they don't really pull it off. The variety.
Absolutely, and Star Wars is a medium where you can tell any kind of story, and it's easy for an audience to connect to really any kind of story. You know, whatever the conflict is, Star Wars can kind of pull off any type of adventure. Really, you just replace the guns for blasters. So yes, it
It's the
definitely
whole
gives a lot
it's
of
the many
potential for
worlds
more
theory,
stories.
really. It's an encapsulation of the or a metaphor for the multiverse or the many worlds physics theories.
Yes, I agree. Mhm. Mhm.
And
So the C characters are some of the best characters, I think. So
in a more grounded
yeah, but
sense,
in the fact that they are C tier.
and in a more grounded sense, it's a metaphor for globalism and cosmopolitan, urbanism and all that, uh, immigration.
We don't have to get that deep, but but you are right. If you want to make the argument for all of that being intrinsic to Star Wars on an overall level, then yes, you could apply some deep critical storytelling ideas to
Well,
it. Absolutely.
of course, Star Trek is a little bit different, but Star Trek, it takes the same sort of idea and makes it into like sort of a corporate organizational structure rather than an adventure structure or business structure. So I think I think a lot of these science fiction serialized programs, they're really successful. They represent diversity in some way. But yeah, for good or for ill. But anyway, let's move on. Next character.
Let's do Padme Amidala. I've been wanting to mention her.
Wait, is this
Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman,
okay?
Anakin's
Yeah,
wife.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna pick his mom for a sec. I don't know why. Um. Padme. Padme. Okay. Well, she's really boring, but however, also very important. She's basically a sex object, trophy wife, but she also kind of isn't because she's this powerful queen. Um. Uh.
So yes, to expand on that, I was excited to talk about Natalie Portman as Padme. Obviously, she's definitely got some sex appeal, just like Carrie Fisher did in the original movies. And obviously, you have the trinity of characters in both trilogies. You have Anakin, Obi-Wan, and
You said Trinity.
Padme.
You're saying
Yeah,
Trinity. She reminds me a lot of Trinity from the Matrix.
absolutely. In the Matrix, they had kind of Morbius, Neo, and Trinity was literally like
The
was
third.
the three heroes, that kind of
And but also she
encapsulated.
also has the same sort of like she's aloof and cool and intriguing, but then her actual like personality doesn't really shine in any like concrete discernible way. And so like I think she's probably the weakest link. However, I think that she is a necessary link. She
I
rounds
understand.
out the other two.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I wanted to talk about Padme because I give her a lot more credit, especially recently, giving Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace some recent watches. Yeah, of course she's important to the story. She's the mom of the original heroes, Luke and Leia, which of course makes up that original trilogy trinity.
She does a
Luke,
lot
Han, and
more
Leia.
in Phantom Menace.
She does. She does a lot. She's kind of a badass in a lot of ways. I think she's very underrated. However, in Revenge of the Sith, well, first of all, I think the stunting acting I think does catch up to Natalie Portman a lot, and people definitely overlook her having a active role, and they forget that Padme is very active. And I think that's important because when Anakin's on screen and he's the hero, and we gave him an A tier, I think his wooden dialogue doesn't matter because he's still the focal point. So with Natalie Portman, Padme being adjacent to that, with her
Yeah.
being active, I
She's
think the
the
wooden
feminine sort
dialogue
of girl
definitely.
character version of whatever we applied to Anakin. I agree.
Yes, and then in Revenge of the Sith, she actually gets sidelined very heavily for her to give birth, and then so all of her agency is definitely taken away. I want to give her a lot of credit for being a badass, and she was super iconic as that female presence in the prequels. But I think she definitely is hampered by how much is missing. Like what you're missing, what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
I think she has a relatively weak personality for the stature she's given. I think in you see this mostly in Attack of the Clones. Because you're right, in Revenge of the Sith, she's sidelined by maternity, and that's sort of it happens to a lot of people. We can't really look into that too much, but in Attack of the Clones,
In Attack of the Clones,
I
she
think
does have a lot of agency, but I
and
think
she doesn't
the
go
character
far with
work,
it. She has a lot of
yeah,
agency and it
exactly,
doesn't go far with it. And I think it
yeah.
really shows the limitations in perhaps the writing of the
Mhm.
story, but also just the acting. I think was a little stale. Um, but it wasn't the wooden acting that Anakin had. It just was Hayden Christensen. It was more just like dull. I don't know, like understated.
And you can buy into that more because he's the focal point. He's getting focused on, and he has amazing payoffs like Battle of the Heroes, the entirety of Revenge of the Sith, of course. So
They're also very young, and they're portrayed as such. So it makes sense that they would be sort of dim-witted and on the surface.
she's definitely not dim-witted, but the way she's written, it seems like that. And I think
She's not
that
supposed
can
to be dim-witted in like as a
yeah,
character.
exactly when it comes off like that. It
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
comes off
exactly.
like
Yeah.
that. Absolutely. And I think that's unfortunate because George Lucas actually tried to do the work of making her seem very smart and competent. At the beginning of Attack of the Clones, she is switching herself with doubles. She's using doubles because she's trying to get assassinated. People are trying to assassinate her. In the Phantom Menace, of course, she retakes her entire planet. Very impressive feat.
I do
So you
think
can give her a lot
this
of
is a
credit, but
case.
it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that.
I'm convinced that this is a case where Natalie Portman is at fault largely because I think had they had another actress, Padme may have seemed a lot more like she lit up the room. And in this case, I think she seems like she's sort of like hiding herself a lot, and the acting
That's a
style
great point. That's a
is
great point. I've
is
never thought about it
awkward.
like that, but
It's
I
an awkward
completely agree.
acting style. So I would put her. Where do you think, at a D or a C or a B? Somewhere in the middle, right?
You know what? I think we can honestly put her at D.
Okay.
Based on how much she's brought down. I've never considered you maybe replace like her being a different actress, and I think George Lucas's dialogue wasn't helping anything. But I think Natalie Portman's presence definitely doesn't work, especially for what you can't see from what you were describing. So I think we can bring Padme down as much as I like her. We can bring her down. We can bring her down today.
All
That's
right.
fine.
All right. Up next.
Let's get to Luke and Leia.
Okay.
So let's do Princess Leia first.
Leia. Okay. Well, this is talk about the similar but different. Her acting is very strong. Like
Right.
Carrie Fisher really carries her character, and I won't hesitate to give her a high grade. I think maybe a a B or an A. Where's the icon? She's iconic,
So
which is hard to do. I think in a fantasy series for a woman actress. I think that's not easy to do. And she had many different sort of emotional ranges that she had to explore when acting, which is again very unlike what Padme had to showcased. So yeah, everything that Padme doesn't have, I think Leia does have.
yes, I completely agree. I will say in Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, the two preceding movies in the original trilogy, I think she actually doesn't have that much to do, but her foundation and her presence and the acting was so strong that it does give her everything that Natalie Portman didn't have, even if her character maybe didn't do as much. But it doesn't matter because of her iconic status at that Han Solo iconic status level. And she gets more credit because she did that as a woman, and that's harder in Hollywood and fiction, especially at the time. So I think we can give Carrie Fisher not only the credit of Padme, but even more so. I think
So
we can
what
put
would you where would you place her, an A or an S?
I think we can. I think we can. I think we can put her at S. Um,
Okay, I'll do it.
even with her not doing that much in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I think that status um, represents everything you want in an iconic female character like that. I think we can put her at S.
Yeah, yeah, underrated. Honestly, I think we're onto something. A lot of people probably wouldn't even who hadn't thought about it would probably not give her that high of a grade. But I think
I think you're right. Yeah.
um
So Luke, let's do Luke.
Luke, where's Luke? Okay, Luke. Yeah, Luke is a little like talk about wooden. His acting is a little wooden. His acting, he has a lot of lines. Sometimes his lines are really well executed, and sometimes they're sort of questionable, but still okay. Um, Mark Hamill is, obviously, I mean, he's not really famous for anything except for this portrayal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you can see why he doesn't come off as a natural actor. However,
Mm-hmm.
the naivete of the actor himself sort of doubles down on the naivete of the character, and it inadvertently works for the character. Essentially, an orphan, someone who doesn't necessarily have a background. So naivety is kind of inadvertently worked really well in the original trilogy for this character. I would give him an A or an S, maybe an A, just because aside from a few great scenes, a lot of his uh his sort of presence is a little discomforting, a little awkward.
Absolutely. So the way that we've been describing these characters and breaking them down for what they represent, what they did in the movies, I think we could come to some very critical realizations about Princess Leia. And as a Star Wars fan, as a very invested and heavy, deep Star Wars fan, all I want to do is put Luke Skywalker at S tier. He does have the iconic status that Han Solo does and Princess Leia does, but I think in the movies, I think
Yeah.
he's just hampered by a few of the things that you mentioned. So I think if I wanted to be realistic about it, I can't look at Luke Skywalker as this perfect, almighty Jedi. I have to look at him within the context of how he was held back in the original trilogy and how he didn't connect to as many people as Han Solo and Princess Leia did, even though he is just as iconic in a lot of respects. But but
Yeah.
now that but for the reasons we give Carrie Fisher the S tier, I think Luke is missing some critical things that don't bring him up to S tier. I think he's inconsistent sometimes. I think Return of the Jedi was a little messy for his character. And for some reason, even though it's Luke Skywalker, everyone associates him with Star Wars. For some reason, especially right now, I'm just not getting that iconic sense that Han and definitely Princess Leia has, especially
Well,
with all the drawbacks to his
well, I
character.
do I do feel like he's defined so much by his interactions with Vader, and most of the other scenes that don't have an interaction with Vader, the acting is sort of not really called for. He is not doing any dramatic plunges, right?
I
So
think Mark Hamill does a fantastic job, of course, but something about it isn't totally elevated. Uh, you know, like I think in the prequels, Hayden Christensen's wooden acting is elevated by what Anakin does. The only thing that's elevating Luke is his relationship to Darth Vader, and I
he
think
does seem
Darth Vader
carted
being
around. I will say that the first two movies he's carted around as some sort of like prodigy or chosen one. And then in the third film, he really has all this power and he does make effective use of it, but it's a little uh stilted. His whole like run through Endor, his run through the uh
yeah, I think yeah.
the battleship, it to me it didn't seem like he he was leading it so much as that he was being shot into it. And they had to rescue him at the beginning of. Oh no, they didn't rescue him. Sorry, but he led a rescue mission. But yeah, I mean,
That
he.
rescue mission was confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an A, and I think to better understand his character, we should evaluate the person that really enhances him and is his catalyst. I think Yoda, right?
Hmm. And
What
Darth Vader.
And Darth Vader
And
is the knight to the Yoda's day, and at Dagobah, Yoda isn't really a catalyst, I suppose, because he does die, and I think he expends so much energy on his apprentice Luke.
I think I figured out why he's not as elevated as we're trying to look for a reason to. And I think it's because he is the audience surrogate,
Okay.
and it's what the thing that everything revolves around in those original movies.
Right, right.
And I think on that fact alone that he introduces us to the world and is the person that fights through the world, I think that's the reason to elevate him to
Yeah,
S tier.
you're dead on, man.
Mhm.
He absolutely is. He's supposed he's not an everyman, but he represents this heroic journey that everyone can relate to or wants to
Absolutely.
experience.
Absolutely. And when he's not as iconic as the other characters, he's acting as that vessel and reaches the iconic status in the critical
And the
moments
fact that he's
of
an
the
orphan
movies.
really helps you relate to him because you think, even though the audience member is probably not an orphan, they're watching it like, oh, this guy has no background, so that gives me perfect leeway to sort of like sympathize and put my own my own problems into his world.
Audience surrogate, but even more so. Yes.
Yeah, because of the orphan. Yeah, well, you see that in a lot of movies. Like you see it in Harry Potter, you see it in Lord of the Rings, you see it in a lot of things. I can't think of everything, but there's quite a few things where the topic of parenthood is dismissed or is destroyed. So, on that
I,
note,
I
do you
think we
want to keep him
found
at
the
A?
no. Let's move him to S tier. I think we found the reason to elevate him
Okay.
because and then he gives opportunities for the iconic characters to be iconic with him, elevating him as well. When he interacts with Han Solo, when he interacts with Obi-Wan Kenobi, when he interacts with Yoda, when he interacts with Darth Vader, when he interacts with the Emperor. He represents a lot of things in Star Wars
And I
that
remember
all the
as
iconic
a
characters
child when I
challenge.
watched the movies originally, I always felt like he was the most personable and most approachable character. As an adult or as a teenager, I got a little more sophisticated and nihilistic, perhaps, and I was looking at him more as like a wooden sort of puppet character. I saw the surrogate hood. It was really plain. It was really plain to me, and I think I got a little disillusioned by it. But as a kid, he was the number one character for sure.
Yes, and I think
S
for
tier.
what he represented in for younger people and for how our opinions can change over time and how meaningful his impact is in general. I think we can just finally elevate him. I was looking for reasons to elevate him because there are plenty of problems with his character. But if you look at all the positives of Star Wars, and the positives of Star Wars are what makes Star Wars Star Wars, I think Luke Skywalker is a great representation for what Star Wars is in general.
Okay.
So, so I think if we're talking about Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is definitely one of those fundamental things. Even if he is a little messy and you're focusing on other characters, I think he's definitely a linchpin. And if you look at it more cynically and things seem more wooden, I think you can find subtext nonetheless.
Yeah,
I think we can elevate him.
he's definitely S, and he's the fulcrum for the show. Um, Everything really depends on Luke towards the end, and effectively, as a sperm or whatever, before he's even born, or
Sure.
sperm and an egg.
Yeah,
Um,
just like me for real. I was smart too. Oh, you too.
were you born in a test tube?
No, I'm unfortunately not a clone, and I don't have
Okay.
tens of thousands of brothers. As sick as that would be, and how sick my armor would be, I was not in a test tube, but I wish I was.
All right. Well, let's go for another character. Let's try to knock out the major ones. How about Count Dooku?
Count Dooku. I think Count Dooku is B tier because audiences just couldn't connect with him in the way that George Lucas wanted him to. Audiences really only responded to the prequel trilogy when Revenge of the Sith came out, and he really just became a stepping stone. So I think he's great, cool character, great design, great backstory, but a lot of that is missing in the movie, and it definitely gives him less of the iconic, important status for Star Wars overall. So while he has all this cool stuff going for him, I
He
don't think he
kind
could
of
go any higher than
clashes
that.
with the environments he's put in. Less, he looks like this like elder statesman of some, like right, like he's a duke somewhere. He looks like this elder statesman of some, weird aristocracy in like the far regions of, you know,
It's a
the
weird.
Outer Rim,
It's
but or maybe
definitely a weird
Coruscant or
character.
someplace. He definitely there's something like odd and like sort of misshapen about his role.
Right.
He's sort of he's sort of bended into being a bad guy when I think inherently he would probably have more of a conscience than he's given.
Right.
Christopher Lee kind of is known for roles like that. Dracula, Saruman, Francisco Scaramanga from the Man with the Golden Guns, the James Bond movie. So I think the acting was really good, but I think the character was kind of weird, and I think
Yes.
the character kind of you kind of looking at it like, wow, this is a good grandstanding, very like menacing sort of actor. You almost look at him like he has his philosophy is the most real and accurate one, even despite him being a villain. But then you just feel like he doesn't belong in the world he's in. So yeah, I think he's lowered to a B. To me, I mean, keep in mind the only other person in B so far is Boba Fett. So it's pretty good company.
Yes, B is really good company with Boba Fett, and I think all the problems that you've had with Count Dooku that you've been saying come from a lack of context from the movies, and I think and he's just a weird design. You know, he's an old guy and he can kick a lot of ass. And I think on a surface level, George Lucas definitely didn't give it enough context. I think he's an amazing, cool character, especially in the expanded universe. But audiences definitely don't connect to him. He's definitely not iconic. He's no Obi-Wan. He's no Yoda. Definitely an interesting idea. George Lucas had a great idea, just didn't give it enough context. And I think what audiences saw from this character was that he was just a stepping stone. Um, when they finally got the context that they needed, because in Attack of the Clones, the movie he was introduced in, he played a very strange role in a very complex in a very convoluted story where he gets lost in the shuffle, and it's just hard to understand what this old sword fighter represents.
Yeah.
And under all this context, so I
No, it's
think
well
George
said.
Lucas did not do a good enough job
And
defining.
the irony is that I think what he really stands on is his charm as a sword fighter. The duel with
Yeah, the
Yoda.
actor. Yeah, the duel of the actor. Yes, I think all that stuff is the only thing that gives him
The
context, and like
choreography, he was a
it's
good sword
literally
fighter though. Like I mean, the
yeah. Oh
choreography
yeah,
was good.
and the context they're giving him with like a Yoda fight and stuff like isn't the right context. Like he needed like a speech or something. He needed like a backstory. Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks, but he just needed to definitely be explained better. He's iconic for people that are really invested in the prequels, but he's not iconic for Star Wars as a brand overall. So I think we can knock him down to C tier, even though I think he's an amazing character and great for the expanded universe.
No,
I think for Star
I think he's
Wars as a
B, but I think he's like, man, he's just sort of mid. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a mid. Uh,
I need another good reason for me to put him up at B. I think he's
oh, for
dragged
why
down
he's for
by
B?
literally
Okay, let me. I think he
because and then
provides.
people find the Yoda fight
I
controversial.
think what you're saying about him being uh sort of lost is double edged. I think it also makes him intriguing, and it makes him seem like there's a little more depth to the the whole federations, the clone army, the whole organization against the Republic. It seems like
Yeah,
there's some
yeah.
sort of mysterious depth to it that's not that well understood, and I think he kind
If
of
you do
provides that.
understand it, then
What?
but if you do understand it, then you have that much more appreciation.
Yeah, no, I think he's like a B minus because he provides a sense of humanity where he's obviously a human, right? And he's running an army of drones and robots, or sorry, clones and drones, right? So he's the only real guy doing that. I think he's kind of the human face for the separatists or whatever they're called. And that I think that was why he had to have this weird aristocratic douchebag kind of swagger that was very kind of elusive and mysterious.
So you're saying that the function that he played in Attack of the Clones deserves a lot of credit because it kind of ties a lot of threads together. I
Yeah.
would completely agree.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly
And
right.
I think the character is amazing anyway. And I think his backstory is great. I think if you look into his character, they just made an animated series about how he became a Sith, and it's one of the most compelling things
Oh,
I've ever
okay. I'll
seen
look into
from
that.
Star
I
Wars.
mean,
It's called Tales
I
of the
always
Jedi.
liked him. I never disliked the guy, but I do think.
Oh, then you're gonna love these. They're 15 minutes each. They're right on Disney Plus. You can literally watch them in the next 30 minutes, and it shows
Okay.
three stories of how Count Dooku uh, turned from Jedi to Sith. So the
I
character
might
just
just
has
do that.
so much. The character just has so much backstory, and he ties a lot of the threads of the complex story. And I appreciate the complex story of the prequels, and I love Count Dooku. It's hard for mainstream audiences to understand what he represents, but I think George Lucas did a very good job with him functionally enough to give him the credit of a B tier.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool.
To craft a complex story in Star Wars, I think that's very impressive.
Yeah. Exactly. And then moving, maybe we'll do a counter example. Let's find an old character that doesn't work that well. How about I think it's Sidious. Sidious before he's uh turned into what was the guy's name? Chancellor Palpatine, the Super Chancellor Palpatine.
Yeah. Well, I think we should do
Okay. You want,
Sidious and Palpatine combined. I think they're the
um.
same character.
Okay.
Well, okay, so I know you broke up prequel
How? Oh, here. Okay.
C3PO.
No. Here. Here's the counterexample I was looking for. Grand Moff Tarkin.
Oh, okay, yes, okay. I give Grand Moff Tarkin because of the simpler story of the original trilogy. I think Grand Moff Tarkin was very easy to understand, and while being a super complex character at the same time, while being portrayed by an iconic actor, and standing toe to toe with some of the most famous heroes in all of fiction. So I think with the simpler story that George Lucas was going for, Tarkin being folded into that is fantastic, and I love Tarkin in expanded universe material too, and he's an amazing vessel for more Star Wars content. But I think for what he represented in the movies alone, I think we can give him a lot of credit. I think we can put Grand Moff Tarkin in A tier.
An A tier. So I was thinking he'd be lower than Dooku because he wasn't in the movie that much. But you're saying that
No,
his
he was so he was only in A New Hope, but he was pretty much in it the entire time. He was the villain. And I think him dying was great. He had great stakes, fitting into a simpler story. You know, definitely a linchpin character that was holding a few things together. And since the elements in the original trilogy were simpler, you know, bad guy, good guy, instead of in the prequels where bad guy controls good guy isn't really good guy. So you had all that going on in the prequels. I think in the original trilogy, Grand Moff Tarkin is definitely an asset
I think it's
in every
easy to.
single way.
I agree. I agree that when you're watching the movie, he's a real presence. That's acting as solid. He's a legendary actor.
He's
Um,
holding. He's
he holds.
controlling Darth Vader. Darth Vader
Yeah,
has to listen to him.
yeah.
He has a
He's
lot
got
of
this
command.
eerie sort of like force majeure hyper power element behind him, and then at the same time, you're like, oh, he's just a man. He's just some guy. He's just a bureaucratic functionary. So
Exactly all
he,
that.
he combines it all very well and very effectively. The one thing that I think is lost on him is that once you have some distance from A New Hope and you're kind of like looking back, it's easy to be like, oh well, Vader was the main, Vader and Sidious, right? The Emperor, as he was known then. Vader and the Emperor are like, those are the people that are like memorable. Whereas there's that weird, you know, admiral looking fucker that was like walking around. He was kind of cool, but he was just some admiral guy. So I think he gets kind of lost in the weeds eventually for most viewers.
I think you're right, and I think we've been talking about that a lot. But I think this is an example where
It really
it
works.
does it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter because he fulfills his
When you
function in
watch the
that movie
film, he
perfect.
definitely is
When
like
you
it is a
when you
lot
watch
better.
the movie,
Yeah.
when you watch the movie, it's perfect. And you already recognize Star Wars from all the other iconic elements. So when you watch that original movie and you see Grand Moff Tarkin, it's that much more of a just a great addition,
All
if
right. Yeah. I
anything
can.
else.
And he's a
Like
very
you,
and
like
he's very
you
different from
don't
Dooku.
you don't need to know who Grand Moff Tarkin is, and you'll see the movie and you'll still love it and you'll love that character. Whereas Count Dooku, like you kind of need to know who Count Dooku is, and like he's a very complex story, and the character's a little awkward,
Yeah.
despite all the amazing things about
The execution was less than
it.
optimal,
Absolutely. So
whereas
so
Tarkin
Dooku has a
was
less
optimal.
Dooku has a lot of things going for him, and we give Dooku a lot of credit. And because Dooku definitely is a little more messier, not having the iconic status hurts them. But because Moff Tarkin was done so well, not having iconic status as iconic, and you know what, he has plenty of iconic status too. Um, but
I completely
but
agree.
he works so well that
I think he was
yeah,
cast. I think he was even cast better for it. I
the
just,
character wasn't awkward at all. Like it
yeah,
didn't have all the problems that Dooku had. But yeah,
very
and
suspenseful too.
I didn't know who you were gonna pick as like the comparison character. But
Okay.
I think Grand Moff Tarkin is a great comparison character. That's
Yeah, I
very
think it's the
interesting.
only real good one. I mean, the other old character would be the Emperor Obi
The
Wan
Emperor, and the Emperor is more
or Ben Kenobi.
overarching.
Oh, you know who is we can do real quick is the who you remember in the original in Phantom Menace the assistant to Padme, Queen Amidala. Like there was
Oh,
this
okay.
old guy who was like her assistant
Oh, right.
on
Okay.
Naboo, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he was in it like a little, like kind of more than you'd remember. Because
I know he has a lot of lines. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
and what do you think for him? He's sort of just the mouth of the Empress or the mouth of the princess or whatever, the Queen.
You know, he's just there to give exposition. You know, I
Yeah,
think he's just. I think
yeah.
he's just.
You want to give him a D? I'll give him a D.
Yeah, I mean, just throw him a D. Like he doesn't. Like he can't be like expanded upon in other Star
D
Wars stuff
tier,
because he's
dude.
not that very interesting. He's just giving a couple exposition about
He's
Naboo.
a weak personality, but he's like he's like C-3PO or like
Yeah, and the Phantom Menace has so many problems that like him being in it is the least of their concern. So it's just kind of like a meh. Like, and I think some problems of the Phantom Menace give the Phantom Menace more credit sometimes. But I think he's just like he's more of a whatever.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's go to another one that's a little fringe, but I think is very iconic. Shock T.
S tier.
S tier. Okay. Why S tier?
Nah, she's another C tier. She's another C tier. I think every Jedi is so cool, and they're all they can be fleshed out, and they can be used to tell a lot of stories within the wider canvas of Star Wars.
The
But
character
she's just as
design is
iconic
amazing.
as character design's amazing. The Togruta is amazing. Obviously, we got Ahsoka Tano from that, one of the best characters in Star Wars, but she's not in the movie, so we're not going to talk about her. Um, um, I mean, we might, but we've been focusing on the movies
Okay. Well,
mostly.
let's go for one that's a little like. I mean, I guess if we want to say
But
some,
let's
do you want to
but
say?
within a I think we can give Shakti a B because of her amazing design, just showing how good George Lucas is
All
at
right.
making at world building, making a cool alien character, and then she's good for expanding the world of Star Wars. Anyway, she's just as iconic as any of the other prequel, if you
Probably.
know what the prequels are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, she doesn't have that like original. I mean, none of those characters have like the original trilogy iconic status backing, but she's
What
just definitely another great addition to Star Wars
one
and
of
the
the
prequel.
most beautiful characters also in the movies.
Yeah, yeah, she
She
hot.
and everything about her kind of conveys that the way she dies even was kind of more elegant than other.
Well, we don't really see her die.
We do see her die
The
because
the
she
death
fights Anakin.
the events surrounding Shakti's death are a area of a point of controversy within the Star Wars community. George
Okay.
Lucas made a deleted scene where General Grievous killed her at the beginning of the movie. They cut that out, so that never really happened. He cut out.
Oh,
He
I
killed.
did see that actually.
Anakin killed Shakti while she was meditating in the Jedi
That's
in
the one
Order
I
66.
was canon for me was the Anakin
Yeah,
one.
I think they cut that out too.
They
Um,
cut that out.
so we never really
Have an
have seen
official
her.
word, I guess. Okay.
When Obi-Wan looks at the security recordings of Anakin killing Jedi, I think maybe you see her. No, you don't even see her. So they cut out all the Shakti deaths. But in canon, I think Anakin killed her in the chair. I think that I think that's what they decided on for
Yeah,
official
in the
canon.
Star Wars video game, the Revenge of the Sith.
Force Unleashed. Force
The
Unleashed.
Revenge of the Sith video game. The Revenge of the Sith video game.
I know. Yeah, I know the Revenge of the Sith video game.
You had you did that duel between Shaak Ti and Anakin, I think. Or maybe I'm thinking
Uh,
or maybe I'm
no, you
thinking of
fought
Lego
Syndralic. You fought
maybe
Syndralic.
or maybe I'm thinking of Lego Star Wars, but there was one game I know where there was a duel between the two of them. Maybe it was a Flash game actually. Now I'm thinking of it, it might not have been canon at all. Okay, anyway, but she's definitely an ornamental character, but so that's why she's
Ornamental for the prequels, and we're giving a lot of the prequels a lot of credit in this
yeah,
ranking. So
yeah, we are definitely.
let's just put her in C. Let's just put her in C
Okay,
because
okay.
she's not
Yeah, the fact that she has two different deaths and then none of them are
like
canon, it just kind of waters it down for me.
if we wanted to put her in B, like we should put Kit Fisto in B, and like they don't really deserve B. Not for what Star Wars is as a
As
whole. Like
films.
for deeper fans, I think that appreciate the prequels more. I think they could be a little higher, but I think we're trying to be more objective, a little bit more general. Sometimes we fall into our biases,
So
but I think
speaking
those
of
are.
general and objective and iconic, up next is Jabba the Hutt.
This is an interesting one for me. I think we could put him at A tier simply on design alone, iconic status. He's just as known
I was
by
gonna put him in S.
mainstream people as yeah. You could put the reason I don't. So basically, what happened is George Lucas, did the special editions. So what happens is he put a scene in A New Hope in the original Star Wars movie where you see Jabba the Hutt and he's like CGI and he looks like really bad. Whereas in the original cuts of the movies back in the 1980s, you never saw Jabba the Hutt until he was this this incredibly intricate design machine, one of the most complex robots ever built for a movie. So when people saw Jabba the Hutt for the first time in the 1980s, they're like, "Oh my god! Like, look at that design! Like that is like that's breathtaking almost. It's like it'll leave you in awe to see
It's
something so
animatronics, but
mechanical. Yeah,
it
and
was at the
mechanically,
it was at the cutting edge of animatronics for the
absolutely,
era.
absolutely. So with that being said, I think Jabba the Hutt is just like in a little has some messy things with him. So like that reveal takes away some because people that are new to Star Wars are going to watch the movies and see that CG scene of Jabba, and that brings him down. Like the people are like, "All right, who cares?"
Okay,
It's like some.
well, this is my thing about Jabba the Hutt is that I think maybe people will watch the remastered Star Wars and look at him as
They have
CG,
to.
and they have to, and they look at him at CG and they'll think, oh, this guy's not that impressive, and that could be a strong reality. However, I still remember him as the animatronic shit pile, and it was great, and all those monsters in his palace were great. But this is the thing that I have issue with Jabba was that he is like this like sort of mogul boss character, slumlord kind of guy. He's sort of powerful but sleazy. He represents pure sleaze, literally. However, as much as he's a slime ball, he doesn't. To me, I never understood how he was able to maintain as much power as he did because he seemed to be
He just
alone.
sits there.
He
He
just
can't
is.
move.
Yeah,
Why not just kill him?
he's a lone operator. He doesn't seem like he's not. He's not on his own planet anymore. He's out in Tatooine. Someone would have just iced him at some point.
The thing about so you kind of have to know a little bit some extra Star Wars stuff to know why the Hutts are so powerful. Basically, they're like, oh, excuse me. Basically, they're like thousands of years old. So so they're like literally they just grow more and more into a fatter slug. Just for thousands of years. What a miserable existence. But I guess they just get to chill out and eat all the time, so not too bad. But basically, because they're like 1,000 years old, their bodies are worth a lot. So like they're kind of like a delicacy, you know. Like as a creature, they are very valuable. Like it's like having a high net worth. So killing that leaves a vacuum of wealth. So that's just an interesting
So
thing about
they're
Jabba.
wealthy.
That's
Just
why.
they're
That's
like
why he doesn't. Yeah, that's why no
they're,
one just ices him.
it's big game hunting. So they're essentially they're prized, like a walrus with like the ivory
Right.
tusks and
So
all that.
so 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 he's basically like a human, like not a human, not human at all.
He's a
Like
human woolly mammoth walrus.
alien. That's a good description of him. I mean, he definitely has a face, nose, and mouth. So there are some human characteristics. Unfortunately, we can relate to Jabba that a little. But yeah, basically, there's an entire economy that revolves around Jabba the Hutt, and if you kill him, then there's like huge power vacuums and stuff. Book of Boba Fett tried to like depict what that looked like. Book of
Funny.
Disney made it. So there's a little bit, they take a few liberties, and some of it might not be consistent with the original Star Wars mythology. But I think they depicted it well. They had like an entire crime syndicate come in, and it was like an army of like hundreds of foot soldiers. So I think that's the kind of vacuum of power that Jabba the Hutt would leave. I don't think it's that well fleshed out, but definitely within the actual mythology of Star Wars, there's like an economy that literally revolves around his fat ass because it's worth like a shitload, which is crazy.
Yeah, that spells it out for me. I had no idea. I always thought that it was just like they just
Yeah, why doesn't anyone just like ice him? He's just sitting there. Just shoot him. I know. So I was like talking about some Jabba the Hutt drawbacks. Eventually, I was going to get to the positives, his iconic status. He holds the entire first part of Return of the Jedi together, and everyone associates Jabba the Hutt with Star Wars. So I think we can put
the
him really
caviar
high.
walrus, right? What is this? Jabba the Hutt.
Jesus. But
Okay,
just a pile of sludge.
I'll give
Just
him an
like
I give him an A. I'll give. I think
living
he's probably the most iconic character in a weird way. So
Yes, yes. His drawbacks are like really weird, like some special edition stuff. The beginning of Return of the Jedi is like messy, so it's harder to connect to as an audience. But I think his iconic design, um, definitely just you could stick him an A with that.
and I
Yeah.
always remember Pizza the Hut too. So the fact that a character based off of him is also iconic somewhat.
What the heck is Pizza Hut? I ain't never heard of Pizza
You never
Hut.
seen Spaceballs?
No, I never saw Spaceballs.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
I know.
got to, dude. You'd love it.
I know. Compared to Star Wars, I'm like, the reason I don't watch it, I'm like, they're just gonna make fun of Star Wars the whole time. Like, whatever.
Yeah, well, they did kind of reduce it.
I
It was
could do
very
without
long.
making fun of Star Wars if I can help it.
You're right. It's sacrilege. I agree.
Mhm.
Okay, up next.
Like unfairly, like without giving Star Wars a fair shake. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, it's Mel Brooks. I think it came out like before.
Yeah, it came out. Yeah, back then. Yeah,
It was an
around the
older
time.
movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, my friend's dad actually acted in the first Star Wars. What do you call it? Parody. He was like he was the Luke Starbucker character or whatever. He was like it was the first
That's
major
interesting.
parody on Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Not
Um,
Spaceballs, something else, like some
yeah. Before
internet
this
fan
was
joke.
'79. Like this was like a couple years after A New Hope. Whereas Spaceballs, it was in the '80s somewhere. I think in the early '80s.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. Oh, very interesting. Nice.
Next up is
I hope he didn't play Jabba the Hutt.
no, I don't think Jabba the Hutt was in it.
I don't think anyone would want to play Jabba the Hutt. I'd
No,
say
it's
I hope he
Pizza the
won't.
Hut, dude. You gotta see the Pizza
Oh
the
yeah,
Hut.
right. Pizza the Hut. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, up next is Well, how about you name one because they have a lot. Kylo Ren. Let's do Kylo Ren.
No, I thought we weren't talking about those gosh damn Forsaken sequel trilogy movies.
We don't
Oh my
have to.
gosh.
Okay. How about Bail Organa?
Uh, C tier doesn't really do anything.
I would say D for sure. D.
Yeah, sure. He's just so unnoteworthy that put him in
I
D.
mean, there is that one scene where he screams when like a youngling is killed by a storm, like a clone.
When adults watch the prequels and Revenge of the Sith, they actually know the actor, and they're kind of like, "Oh, look at that."
Yeah.
That's the only thing he is going for. Like, I love the character in expanded universe material, but the movies, he's just like, he's whatever. I like Bail Organa. He's cool. He took Princess Leia in as an adopted father, but he died on Alderaan. Unfortunately, he was like the main guy that died on Alderaan. Very sad. But when he was in the prequel movies, he didn't really do anything. And he
Well, he
definitely
was
wasn't
the
in the
problem I
original
have with
movies.
him is that he does like have this critical task set out before him by the heavens where he has to take care of the chosen children, and like nurture them to some extent, especially the daughter,
Mhm.
not less so Luke.
Yeah, and
But
they were depicting that in the prequels, so that
but
kind of gets swept under the
the
rug.
caveat for me is and it's a big detractor is that he just doesn't do anything in the movies at all.
Yeah, right.
He,
Nothing notable.
no,
He's just a guy. He's just a guy in Star Wars.
he was a
He's just a
politician.
guy.
Yeah, yeah. He was like a a kind of chill politician. Yeah, I'll give him D because he just was so unadorned and generic.
Mhm.
Um, maybe not generic, but he was just they dialed back his role a lot. I think made him very lame.
Mhm.
Okay. Let's do. How about who's that guy? Waddle. Lando's
Yeah.
oh
Wait, no, Watto? You mean the
Watto.
the Toydarian?
No, not Toy
Uh,
Darian. No, who's the guy that was a co-pilot with Lando?
that's Nien Nub.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
what do you give him?
C, good design, great for building out the world of Star
I'm
Wars.
gonna give him a
Not
C. I'm gonna give him a C.
not too notable past that point. I think he gets a little more credit than some of the prequel Jedi, but
Do
not
they
much.
have who's that guy who's that character that is like supposed to be the best X-wing pilot?
Luke?
Carillion or something. No, he's a member of the Rebel Alliance, but he's just a pilot, and he's like the best one. And then Luke ends up being like better. Wedge Antilles. That's it.
You're talking about Wedge? Okay, I was just about to say Wedge. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think he's the best, but he definitely was like there. He was like, oh, basically, he's the only one in the original movies that's not the main character that made it through all three. So he was in the Hoth battle, the ice battle against the AT-AT walkers. He was in the Death Star run, and he was in the Return of the Jedi thing. So he was an OG, and you could not kill this man. He was a literal G, and I give him all the respect in the world.
You know
He
what?
gets a
You know what
salute
they
from me.
did is who's that?
Do we want to do Wedge? Are we doing Wedge
I
right now?
think so. Is he the one with the mustache, or is that a different one?
That's Biggs.
Okay,
Wait, not Biggs. Why am I forgetting? It's Luke Skywalker's friend.
who dies? Yeah.
Darklighter. Yeah, Biggs Darklighter. Yeah. Rep. He was a good Luke friend, but he didn't really do anything other than make Luke sad when he died. I would
Okay.
put.
Well,
I would put Biggs Darklighter. There's a YouTuber, Star Wars Explained. His favorite character is Biggs Darklighter, but I cannot relate to that love. It doesn't. I don't care for him.
Yeah, well,
I could.
you know why? Is because he represents what what we would be doing if we were in the Star Wars world.
He fought his best and he died. He just died.
What like the fanboy would be doing. You'd be like,
right. So we can put Wedge in A tier because he's a goat, and you don't really need to know he's a goat, but he's in all the original movies.
I
And
don't know
he's
what he
sick.
looks like though. I mean, I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, and then Biggs is a D. Fuck Biggs. He died.
They're taking a lot. I feel like from Top Gun, or maybe it's the other way around. Because
Top Gun actually, they said they were inspired by the trench run.
there you go. There you go. Chronologically, that makes sense at least. Okay, Wedge Antilles is an S tier.
No, A tier.
A tier.
I don't know if I can give him that. I mean, S.
You know who? Yeah. Okay, who is that one in the Disney who's played by the actor who's in everything now? But he was like the friend, but he wasn't the friend. He was supposed to be like the Han Solo character, but he was more like a Wedge Antilles character. In the last three Disney movies.
Oh, what? Poe Dameron?
Yeah. He was kind of like a weird fusion of Han Solo and Wedge Antilles.
Yeah, he was like Han Solo, but like an X-wing fighter.
Yeah, who had no conflicts, personal conflicts at all. He just sort of was like ambient.
Yep, terrible character. Let's not talk about him.
Well, we're gonna rank him as an F, maybe.
Let's save the sequel characters for
Okay.
next time.
We could do that. We could do a different one. Yeah, let's look at the time. We're at an hour and a half, so we'll run through the characters. We're almost done with those.
Let's just do a few more, and then
I think we're almost done. I mean, we have
a lot more. We haven't talked about the Emperor. We haven't talked about Darth Vader. We haven't talked about Darth Maul. I've been waiting to get to those.
Okay, well, how do you feel about? Okay, you should name what you want to talk. Oh, Qui-Gon Jinn. How do you feel about Qui-Gon Jinn?
Oh yeah, so I think those four. I think we need to finish up with. So Qui-Gon, he is the. I think he is the prodigal Jedi. He's like the fundamental idea of what a Jedi should be. Fight for what's right, but not close yourself off to attachments. Don't close yourself off to love. I think Qui-Gon understood that there needs to be balance within yourself to do the right thing, and I think he was killed before his time. Only the good die young, and Qui-Gon died before he was given the chance to.
He might actually be more famous than Samuel L. Jackson. So now
Liam Neeson. Yeah, every time he said Sam Jackson, I was like ready to say Liam Neeson, and then I forgot to mention. But yeah, Liam Neeson. But the Phantom Menace definitely goes under a lot of people's radars, so people don't remember Qui-Gon Jinn that much. But if you watch the Phantom Menace, he Phantom Menace has a lot of problems, and Qui-Gon Jinn definitely gets lost in the shuffle a lot. I think, even though I think he should have been given more focus in the Phantom Menace, and the movie should have been more focused overall. So it's harder for general audiences to connect with him. But I think as a Star Wars fan, he represents the best parts of what a Jedi should be. So I think we got to give him credit for the amazing Duel of the Fates with Darth Maul. So I think we could put Qui-Gon in. I I want to put him in A tier. You know what? I think we can put him in A tier because I think his status as a main character in a movie. I think that separates him from. I think that separates him from how iconic he needs to be because he plays a certain role in the movie and fulfills it well. And if you want to think about the deeper subtext, you can. But you have Liam Neeson as a Jedi, and he has the Duel of the Fates. And the prequels being what they are, I think we can separate the character from a lot of that and just give him merits based on how cool he is overall,
I
despite some
will
of the
say that
problems.
he wasn't the best birthday cake, face, or the best, toy to candle to put in a birthday cake as a kid. He was a
Because
little,
he was
he,
dead.
he was a little bit of this gross sort of like underdog stoner hero.
Definitely looked completely like a stoner. Yeah, you know what?
He
We
was
can
like
put him in B. We can put him
he
in
was
B.
he was like the big Lebowski of Jedi. I mean, he like he would acknowledge that he was like ineffectual. Like he would kind of like joke about how he couldn't get shit done. I don't know if that kind of makes him a better character. I think he helped make a lot of the scenes underwater in Naboo like more tolerable because those scenes were like kind of tedious, and
Yeah,
he would make jokes about, oh, there's always a bigger fish, always another
yeah.
fish. You
I
know,
think that I think the movie just if the Phantom Menace, the focal movie that he's in, just doesn't resonate with a lot of people. But for what he represents in Star Wars, he gets a lot of credit, but not enough credit for how much the Phantom Menace doesn't
I mean,
resonate with people.
I
So
think for the first act out of three acts in that focal movie, Phantom Menace, I think he was probably the only character I would like anyone really paid attention to because every other character was fucking rambunctious and obnoxious, or they were like
the drone
boring
memes.
and drab like Obi-Wan Kenobi was at the time.
Right, and
So
Qui Gon was a little drab too.
he was a little
Audience didn't
drab.
connect.
He was
Audiences didn't connect to that movie for a reason. And I think if Qui Gon was represented better, I think that those
Yeah,
movies
I
would be
think I
even
think
more liked.
he was kind of sluggish for sure.
Yeah,
I don't think
a
he was
lot of things holding him back.
but I don't think he was a bad character. I just think he was
I think this is a Count Dooku situation where George Lucas had a great idea of what the character would be, and then if you look at it even further as a Star Wars fan, basically Qui Gon is extremely instrumental and sets all the events in motion.
yes.
But George Lucas kind of just did a little sloppily. Basically, if Qui Gon didn't die to Darth Maul, he would have trained Anakin. And if Qui Gon trained Anakin, Anakin wouldn't have turned into Darth Vader because Qui Gon would have been a good teacher. Whereas Obi Wan was more connected to the Jedi rules, and he only trained Anakin because Qui Gon told him to. So Obi Wan wasn't ready for the responsibility of training the kid with all these fears. So if you look into it as like a Star Wars fan and for what Qui Gon represented, George Lucas had a really good thing going. But for the presentation and the execution of what the Phantom Menace was, I think it holds Qui Gon back a lot.
He was held back a lot.
Even though
However, you have to acknowledge that
even though it works for me and I love it.
even though he was sort of slow on the draw and sort of like this sort of peripheral character in the grand scheme, he did, I think, midwife the whole Anakin plot line, and I think he was kind of the deciding factor in even having Anakin be a part of the power base in the universe, the Senate, being a key player in the galactic politics. I think it was all like hinging on Qui-Gon's personality. So in a sense, he was instrumental. But yeah,
Absolutely instrumental, completely instrumental.
yeah,
But the execution just I think holds it back, holds him back a lot. I think the movie brings Qui Gon down because it doesn't do a good enough job at
okay,
showing that,
okay.
and
Well,
that's why audience.
now I got his counterpart. We'll see what
Well, we can put him in B. We can
we'll
put him
put
in
him in.
B.
Yeah, he's established as B tier. Now the counterpart, I want to see what you have to say. The old Ben Kenobi.
Yes, old Ben Kenobi has everything that prequel Qui-Gon did not. He gave great context to the world of Star Wars, the galaxy of Star Wars. He is iconic. He fit the role of the movie very well, played by an iconic and amazing actor. I think there's not a lot of drawbacks to the original trilogy, New Hope. I think he served his purpose very well and has iconic status because of it, and spawned younger Obi-Wan Kenobi, who is so compelling based on how iconic. Even if the prequels are messy, Obi-Wan Kenobi as a younger version is so compelling, and even mainstream audiences know it, even though prequels had less of a reach, because of how instrumentally iconic and perfectly Alec Guinness implemented that character. So I think he is everything Qui-Gon didn't.
There
I
is
think he has
really
original trilogy status. Yeah.
there is really no better like avuncular wisdom figure in any epic series that I can think
The
of.
mentor role. The
The
mentor
mentor
role.
role, the wise old man. I think there's nothing that really surpasses Alec Guinness's performance, except maybe Ian McKellen as Gandalf, but that they're like kind of in the same boat.
Right?
Um, and the lines, his voice is amazing. Like he and Harrison Ford have great voices, and they all have pretty good voices because it was the late '70s, and they didn't have the instant gratification culture. People kind of cared more about physical stuff, better voices, I guess, overall. But for whatever reason, he had a very sagely voice, and in all his performances, but definitely in Star Wars: A New Hope. I think he's definitely S tier for sure. I think he's a little bit hampered by the fact that wasn't a very physical character. I think he's hampered by the fact that he kind of was a little too cool sometimes. Like he had everything under control, even when he seemed like he didn't. I think that made him seem a little how do I put it? Like
More compelling. More
but
compelling.
it made him seem a little overly strategic and not very tactical. A little too
Well,
hands
yeah.
off. I guess it all kind of circles back to him not
Right,
being
but
very physical.
right, but that doesn't matter because of how well the role was defined in that movie and how it represented the mentor character. So the drawbacks of
No, I mean no,
it, it,
it's a relative drawback, but it's not a drawback compared to like Yoda or something. Like it's just a drawback. It would have been interesting to see him do more of those things, but it doesn't diminish like his
right, exactly.
performance.
And I think he would have been that much better if they could have old Obi-Wan Kenobi doing flips and stuff. Obviously, that would look super silly, and they would have to do it in a more
Yeah,
reasonable way.
it would be hard to pull off for sure.
Right.
Yep.
I think he's the same level as the young Obi-Wan Kenobi because he's the reason young Obi-Wan Kenobi exists, even though he wasn't as well
And
defined in the
imagine
original trilogy.
that S tier, two completely different actors, but the same character effect, more or less.
Yeah, incredible. I just wish the prequel trilogy resonated with more audiences. Um, but if anyone knows anything about Star Wars or is even aware of it within their peripheral, I think Obi-Wan Kenobi on any level will stick out, and I think it carries the
Yeah.
legacy very well. Of course, we have that Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show that came out. It, it it didn't increase the character. It didn't decrease the character. A lot of people are excited because that character is very iconic, and
Kenobi.
mainstream audiences love Obi-Wan. But basically, the show was just so mid that no one really responded to it. So it didn't really hurt the character bring it down. But definitely wasted potential on Disney's part because they could have done something truly amazing with Obi-Wan to bring mainstream audiences back. And the show was actually very just silly. It was like it seemed like it was made for little children, but not in a good way. So that was unfortunate. But I
Yeah, I
think
mean, he's been
Obi-Wan
bastardized.
and
He's
every
been bastardized somewhat by all the new media and the spin-offs and the
well, I
and
think
the reboots.
Star Wars maybe as a whole has been
But yeah,
definitely
he's definitely
on this.
he's definitely the microcosm for
But I think the prequels,
macrocosm.
I think the prequels hurt the brand a little bit too. I don't think audiences connected with it as much as those original movies at all. But
You know what it really hurt is it hurt the international audience a lot because the numbers because in America, people would watch it anyway, but overseas, like in China or whatever, or Russia or whatever, any India, anywhere, they just like were like, oh, what is this? A new Star Wars? It sucks. I'm not gonna watch this. I have to work at a sweatshop. I can't watch
Right.
every fucking movie.
I think George Lucas. I think he's a really commercial guy and really loves merchandise. And I think if his movies were a little better, I think I think the Star Wars brand would be that much stronger. And then of course Disney is just um, really having trouble maintaining the brand too.
Did I ever?
But for what it is in general, Obi-Wan can stands above all
Did
that.
I ever tell
For
you
all
how?
the Star Wars.
Did I ever tell you how the the stormtrooper that who he meet Obi-Wan and Luke meet who tries to pat them down or whatever, and he's like,
It's
oh,
not Cody.
these
It's not
aren't the
Commander
droids
Cody.
you're looking for. Or he's like asking about these droids. He's looking for the droids, right? And Obi-Wan does a Jedi mind trick. He's like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And then the stormtrooper says, oh, these aren't the droids we're looking for. And then they walk off. You know that scene?
Move along.
Move
Move
along.
along.
Yeah.
Yes.
That actor who played that stormtrooper was my mom's acting coach when she was doing commercials.
Oh no way! That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
coolest.
yeah.
Lucky,
I met him. He's a funny
lucky
guy.
bastard gets to
Yeah.
wear a stormtrooper costume and in the scorched earth that is the Middle East, and then
And he
be
was
out there.
when I met him, he was complaining to me about how George Lucas was turning all the voices into Jango Fett's voice. He was redoing all the voices. So
Oh yeah. They didn't do his. They didn't do his, but
I,
I can see why he would have thought
yeah, he
that
was worried about
George
it.
is
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to do that. Yeah,
Anyway,
that makes perfect sense. That's very funny.
anyway, up next.
Alec Guinness S tier.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and up next. Uh,
Yoda.
by the way, I just as a side note, I've seen Alec Guinness in some other movies that were like earlier where he has the same sort of look and voice. And you'd be surprised, like he doesn't always pull off that avuncular sage persona in every movie. So like he really worked in Star Wars, and also he didn't when he was working on Star Wars, he wasn't like the happiest camper. Like a lot of, I think by a lot of accounts, he didn't even really respect the people he was working with. So it kind of helped that he was almost like this elitist tool behind the scenes, and then when he was on stage, he really like lit up the scene, the
It's very
set.
interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen Alec Guinness in anything else. I only know him for how the impact that he has as his Star Wars character.
Okay. I think the most famous one, because it's also in the desert, is Lawrence of Arabia, and he plays the Arabian guy who like works with Lawrence. So he plays like a similar looking. He has a hood and everything. So he plays a similar kind of
I gotcha.
angle.
Interesting.
Okay. We could go in so many different directions. We're kind of running out of the main characters. How about General Grievous?
I love General Grievous. I grew up with General Grievous. He's probably still one of my favorite designs in all of Star Wars. Um, I used to like General Grievous more than Darth Vader as a kid. Now I
Really?
realize how insane I was. Darth Vader is cool beyond anything else I've ever seen in my life. No,
I bet you got in
so
so many arguments with kids at the playground, like, well, why don't you like Grievous more than Vader? And they would just,
no, everyone agreed with me. Everyone
oh,
fucking
really?
loved
Okay.
Grievous. Oh yeah, big time. Grievous was we would watch Clone Wars all the time. We'd all talk about the episodes. And everyone was like, "Yo, Grievous is gonna be in an episode, bro." And I was like, "I know, he's so sick."
Grievous was
Yeah,
cool. I'll give you that. I had maybe the opposite reaction. I always felt like Grievous was confusing because I admired his like abilities. I thought he was a very, he like steals lightsabers from Jedi's and then uses the lightsabers, and he's like has 4 arms, or I think it was 4. And yeah, he's like really an impressive dude. It's a little weird that he's like a reptile guy, but it works because a lot of aliens are. But it's also a
let's get
little weird that he would even want to be super powerful. I didn't really understand his whole vengeance scheme. I guess there's backstory there I don't know about. Uh, and the one thing that really annoyed me though is that he had these lightsabers on his belt, And any good Jedi, I feel like, would have used like a Force ability to activate a lightsaber and just literally eviscerate him like where he stood, just by turning on any of his fucking lightsabers, because he had so many of them and he wasn't Force sensitive. So that kind of put a hole in the whole character, self narrative for me. But beyond
Well,
that,
I have great explanations for all that. I'm a big Grievous fan. I know a lot about his lore and stuff. Yeah, if you're like some punk ass Jedi that's not worth your salt,
yeah.
Grievous will destroy you. His machinery within the context of the Star Wars universe is designed to kill Jedi. So he is fully equipped to. The Jedi would not be able to do anything with the Force, with how powerful and menacing Grievous was, just through his robotics mechanics and as an alien.
So
Of course, he's a
that
Of course, he's a cyborg.
so you think the actual technology he wears prevents Force magic from working on him? The midi
No, I
chlorians.
don't think that. That's true. That's what it is in the
Oh no
in the
no no no
mythology.
no!
Of
So
Star Wars.
that's the explanation. Is what I'm asking.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. So the
Which makes him even
midichlorians.
cooler.
The midichlorians, yeah, it does make them a lot cooler. The midichlorians literally cannot even, penetrate, the ether.
Well,
Okay.
I think the Force is interesting. It's judge me by my size. Don't judge anything by its size. I think obviously, when Obi-Wan describes the Force, it's an energy field, blah blah blah. But I think the Force works when you are calm, you are at peace, when you are in tune. And the Jedi of the prequel era were not that. They were
So I'll put him
overconfident and
in
cocky.
light
The
of
Jedi,
this. In light of this, though, I'm going to put him in S because I didn't realize that he could dispel or rebound force power.
Yoda would kick his ass easily. He has the Force power to just get him easily. Mace Windu would destroy him. Anakin would destroy him. Basically, those are the only Jedi, and then of course Obi-Wan, who we saw. So if you look at Obi-Wan beat Grievous,
Is that the ultimate test, you think, for a Jedi sword fighter?
absolutely, it's the ultimate test of a Jedi to beat a being like Grievous. So don't just think of Grievous as some other punk that's not a Jedi. Grievous is a being within Star Wars that has the very similar capabilities to Jedi. Grievous is designed to climb up walls, do a lot. So interesting. The design lends a robotic ability to create just an interesting entity within the Star Wars universe. So if you see Obi-Wan fight him, General Grievous has 4 lightsabers and he knows how to use them. And General Grievous could kill any other Jedi within seconds with those 4 lightsabers. Obi-Wan is a pro, freaking badass, knows what he's doing, loves to kick ass. He dispatches General Grievous's lightsabers to the point where General Grievous can't touch Obi-Wan. And if General Grievous can't even touch Obi-Wan with his onslaught, that means Obi-Wan is in tune enough to force push him. So Obi-Wan literally is just like, you can't come at me anymore. Now just get away. Like you're basically like this demon thing. Now I push you away with the Force because you can't touch how zen I am. I'm literally zen as hell. I'm literally an OG. I'm literally a badass. So Grievous uses his capabilities even more strategically because Grievous doesn't always fight either. Like he loves killing the weak opponents because he knows he can. The only strong opponents for him are like Mace Windu, the top of the heap of the Jedi. So if Grievous is ever in a pickle, and he is a lot of the time because the Jedi are always sending Anakin and Obi-Wan after him, Grievous uses his abilities to just run away. Running away is makes things a lot easier for him. He can get out in the most convoluted ways. Grievous is so interesting.
He's a complex
he's
figure.
cool.
I appreciate him a lot more. I was gonna put him in like B. I was gonna put him in B, but the way you've explained it to me has convinced me that he's S, which is the biggest.
I have a lot of context for Grievous, and now you do as well. But maybe let's think about it within the context of all the movies. People just see him as a robot, and definitely, he's just a mini boss for Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's compelling within the movie, absolutely, but I just don't. I think he's just missing a lot of iconic status that like Han Solo and Princess Leia has. But I think George, because the prequels had so many problems and was hampering its
Well,
audience,
he reminds
his
me
responsiveness to it.
of Bane. Like it feels a little like they went from well, maybe
I but
Dark
yeah,
Knight
he is.
Returns.
He is like a Batman villain. Absolutely, I think George Lucas's creativity shines through in characters like General Grievous. So I think on the merit of how interesting of an idea it is to put that kind of a thing in Star Wars, and then also amazing, awesome lore that comes with it. I think S would be amazing, and I love to put Grievous in S. I would love to put a lot of Star Wars characters, especially in prequels in S. But I think we could put him in A tier on a lot of merits, like the
Okay.
creativity and the interesting idea for someone to fight a Jedi, because Jedi are painted as mythical figures in the Star Wars mythology, and you have a kind of like you have the cyborg, interesting with a great design that fills a very crucial role in Revenge of the Sith. So he feeds into the story too. He kind of is a Count Dooku surrogate where you have to do this so that everything else can happen. The whole rest of the combine, and they pull it off in a simple way, easy to follow. So I think Grievous has so
He's
many
he,
merits that we can just pop in A.
he does seem a little like the AI replacement for Dooku. However, you're being a really
Well,
good
Dooku
case.
actually kicks his ass. Dooku actually beats Count Dooku. Um, yeah, Dooku
Really?
trained him. He says, "You were trained in my Jedi arts, but I was trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku," which is true.
Oh, okay. That's I forgot that, but now I remember it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, okay. So moving to the next one.
Have a good Grievous discussion. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was another one that was good on the birthday cakes. Was
Mm.
Grievous.
Hell
Uh,
yeah.
okay. How let's really narrow in on the main characters. Darth Maul.
Darth Maul, Duel of the Fates. Obviously, he comes back in some Star Wars adjacent media, but for the movies, I think when people think of Star Wars, I think you can think of Darth Maul. Um, I think he is just kind of like a mirror of Darth Vader, and I think when George Lucas mirrors Darth Vader, I think that's very successful. People in the 1990s seeing a lightsaber with two sides. I mean, that must have been talk about how a simple idea turns into like, oh, that's really like interesting and a really great idea. So the design, fighting two Jedi in their prime, showing what Jedi can truly do in their prime, putting that on display. For Star Wars, I think Darth Maul brings the entertainment value to a whole nother level and represents how amazing and cool it can be. And he doesn't really have a character per se, but he definitely represents a lot of the best parts of Star Wars. So I think we could put Darth Maul in A tier.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I see all those points. I feel like Darth Maul is not a smart character. That's very like sort of he seems so that kind of rounds out the whole definition of him. I think he's a little bit of a degenerate by design, which makes him kind of the boogeyman at first, but after a while you're sort of convinced that he's just gonna die because he's too evil to be sort of contained in a three movie series, a 3-part series or whatever. I do think that his showdown with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan was like really not only iconic and meaningful, but it sort of it was like it was what do you call it? Like it was instructional. Like it gave me like a moral lesson on like bravery and vengeance. And this is before I'd seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies where they have a little bit of that too. This was like in the like late 90s, early 2000s when this came out. It was like I don't know what was the exact year when it came out.
1999.
2099. All right, let me look it up. Let me look it up.
1999.
1999. So yeah, when it was released, this guy was kind of like the boogeyman that in the Star Wars. I'd seen the originals, And Darth Vader was always a little, detached and sort of secretive. Whereas Darth Maul, he was like, you could see his face. But that was so crazy. And I didn't know if it was makeup or not. And it just made it even crazier. And then you had this old man who had to fight him, and you're like, there's no way he could win. And then his apprentice has to fight him, and you're like, okay, well, his apprentice is a dipshit. And then his apprentice, tricks him in some sort of like Faustian bargain that like upgrades his entire life and then like changes the whole direction of the series. So it was a very pivotal, like, the battle, or what do you call it, the duel of the fates. What did you call the duel that they have, the showdown at the end of the
It's duel of the fates.
yeah, duel of the
Yeah.
fates. Yeah, that was probably the most pivotal scene I'd seen in a movie, just at that age when I saw it. So it's hard for me to be unbiased. I do think that Darth Maul might not be the best character, but I don't think I think that movie, it kind of, that scene, the Duel of the Fates, kind of set the pace for a lot of my preconceptions about Star Wars that I have now.
You know what? Circling it back to what we were talking about, Qui-Gon, like how the Phantom Menace doesn't do his character justice. Like it doesn't give enough context for who that person is.
Yeah.
But the way you're talking about Darth Maul kind of gives context to what the situation actually is.
Yes, exactly. And now
It gives the movie more of a meaning.
It does.
And it sticks out more in Star Wars as a whole to general fans, to Star Wars fans in general, to mainstream audiences.
They kind of bookended it to like the last scene in the movie. But
absolutely,
yeah.
I think they could have given him more scenes, but for the way it is, for accepting what is with Darth Maul, I think he gets a lot of credit for having iconic status and giving a new perspective on well, that was like the first, like you hadn't even seen, well, you had seen Darth Vader before that, but giving you new perspectives that you've never even thought of before.
And his character was entirely designed based on suspense because he had no dialogue. He had, I think he said one thing the entire movie. So I would put him in A just because it was kind of, it's not that easy to write a character like that doesn't talk and yet is still supposed to be like a heavyweight. I mean, they did that more than
not to mention he came back to life, and when he comes back to life in the tangential Star Wars media, it's the most epic thing I've ever seen. So that's cool too. I could give him a little bit of credit on there, but definitely he represents a lot of good things within what the Phantom Menace was, and ties a lot of the ideas of that movie together. Yeah. And I think that's more important than, oh, I wish he had like more lines in the movie, because he definitely ties a lot of the prequels together. He ties a lot of what that movie was together. He definitely has very iconic status. Just the drawbacks are the impact of the prequels, maybe needing a little more to do, but having so much in the way of context for Star Wars and meaning to Star Wars, and cool factor like General Grievous has, that we can put him. I think we can put him in A tier.
Absolutely, and a totally unusual character, I think, in Star Wars, and yet he really, like, in a way he was a Vader baby. Like he kind of has the same,
but like in a cool way, not like a.
Yeah, he was not
like in a copy way,
no,
and George Lucas George Lucas's ideas are very fleshed out and meaningful in Star Wars. If you take a second look,
well, I think the idea
the Sith in general.
I think this idea that he was a secondary sort of Vader really worked in the context of having already seen the prequels, the originals, and going into a new movie that's earlier in time. Maybe the universe is less mature,
and it wasn't like derivative of Darth Vader, because George Lucas made the idea of what a Sith was. So if Darth Vader's a Sith, then other people can be Sith, and they can be meaningful in other different ways. But Darth Vader also stands alone, and you can have other people with similar
it's the founder effect,
that are completely different.
The timeline They did a magical thing with the timeline because they although Vader is the first one, they made it seem like Darth Maul could have been a prior. So that was a tricky thing to do, and I think because they made him so much more physically rambunctious, it ended up working. You know,
Yeah, among other things. Yeah,
well, the kinetic
the
energy.
design, and the kinetic aspect.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that he looks very all over the place too, and that makes you think that he might be more powerful than even Vader. But really, Vader's more powerful. It's just that Darth Maul has a lot of flash, and that was the kind of a gimmick that ended up really actually being more than a gimmick. It ended up working.
Yep, all good stuff. What do you think, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should do Sidious and then end with Darth Vader.
We have Yoda, C3,
Yo-
R2D2.
Yoda, R2, Sidious, Darth Vader.
Okay, we'll do Yoda.
Am I missing someone?
I mean, we have more characters, but those are the main ones, I think.
Anyone?
I'll let you know.
Of course, there's like a few like.
I mean, there's some of the
You know,
Jedi's
the
from the prequels.
let's get to these last main ones. We need to get to these.
We're
main
basically
ones.
out of major characters from the originals and prequels.
No, we have Sidious, Vader, Yoda, R2. Those are the
No,
keys.
I'm saying. Oh, sorry. We have we don't have that many characters from the prequels left.
Who do we have left from the prequels?
We have Coyote Mundi, Kit. Who's that? Plo Koon.
Coyote Mundi, Plo Koon.
We have
C-tier.
we have Boss Nass. Okay, yeah. Put the right.
C-tier. Boston Nass is D-tier.
Wait, I want to make some points about the C tier Jedi though. Boss Nass. Who's Waddle? We have Waddle. And then we have the commander clone commander guy.
Commander Cody. C. Good.
Yeah, Commander Cody's pretty lame, so I'll put him in C. I mean,
well, he's dope in Clone Wars, but the movies he doesn't do anything. Except betray the guy he works for. Good job, dude. You had one job, which was
to
protect this.
They have the black character that was like the soldier on Naboo that worked for Queen Amidala.
Captain Typho.
Yeah, that's that guy was like a D character. I think.
Jar Jar. We haven't talked about Jar
Young
Jar.
Anakin, which doesn't really count because we already did Anakin.
Yeah, whatever.
Jar Jar's here.
Shmi Skywalker.
We have Bosk on the original side. We have less on the original. We have Greedo and Bosk, and the robot, the robot mercenary.
Okay.
And Darth
we don't have to do the robot mercenary. That one's not.
Okay. The Sarlacc pit is on this list of all things. Very meta. The Wampa is kind of meta. That's about it. So let's do. How about we do not Yoda? That's a little too much for me right now.
We're gonna have to get to it eventually. So how many more do you want to do?
Let's do R2D2 right now. We'll do the old. We'll just do the Boss Nass. We'll do the. I'll tell you what, man. We'll do like 4 more of each, kind of, because that's about how many there are that are worth talking about. Okay. R2D2. Yeah.
Okay. R2 S tier. Right.
S tier. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely charming for his communicative capacity.
Yeah, but iconic. Everyone knows R2D2. He represents droids in Star Wars, and droids are fundamental.
I feel like he's a B though, because he's not. He doesn't really.
He's definitely not a B because he represents a lot of the.
I mean, it's like Wally.
Meaning he represents a lot of the accessory things. So you can have all these accessory things in the background, and then you have R2D2, which kind of like defines what that type of side support character can be. It's like the quintessential side character that also represents deeper mythologies within Star Wars, that also represents iconic sounds. Everyone can associate R2D2's beeping with Star Wars. Everyone can, I
I mean,
could do. I could put his
he's
sound to.
definitely like
If I showed
yeah.
someone in High Point University, which is the school I go to, like C-3PO talking, they'd be like, what is that?" If I played R2D2 noises in their ear, they would guess R2D2. You know, it's like the Pikachu of um,
Yeah,
Star
but
Wars.
is
And
Pikachu S tier? This. I mean,
well, Pikachu is S tier because of its icon status. Because we can't put R2
all right.
with Count
Icon stats
Dooku.
alone. Yeah, okay. I'll give it S.
I just don't think we could put R2 with like Count Dooku. If you
He's like the the Hedwig or he's like a red herring kind of thing. Like he sort of isn't really about anything, and
he introduces you to Star Wars, like the entire first act of A New Hope is basically R2D2. You
that's
know,
true.
and R2D2 has a full personality. R2D2 is in the prequels and the originals and does a lot in both. He's very meaningful to the human characters. He's meaningful to the human characters. He gives a lot of spunk. He's very meta. He's one of the
And
most
he's
recognized.
also
It showed
in
that,
he's also in the Disney movies too, right?
yeah, but he got sidelined because Disney knew he was too famous.
Yeah,
So then they wanted to leave more room for the terrible characters. So they pretty much removed R2D2 from most of the
that's
scenes.
crazy. That's so crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, they could have at least just made the movies about R2D2. Would have been way better.
way better.
Ugh.
It proved that a trash can can be compelling.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't that what it was made out of? Was that what
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a trash can, and it was made out of like
you know there
I don't know. It was made out of like it was made out of a
there
bunch of
was a
stuff.
guy inside the whole time who was talking.
Yeah, Kenny Baker, rest in
Yeah.
peace. He's dead too.
All right, S tier. All right, you sold me.
Like because R2 is either an S tier or like a B tier, and like why would you give R2D2 a B tier? Because it's R2D2, just like it's Darth Vader. It's not Count Dooku. You know, not a lot of people
Yeah,
know Count Dooku.
he's not some like you don't have to pause and think of who that was. You know, you'd instantly know.
That's why.
And he's not. There's no controversy. It's just like, oh yeah, it is what it is. It's like Jesus.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah, sure.
or whoever.
Well, I'd say Anakin is more like Jesus,
Well,
definitely.
he's
But
like,
I can see the R2D2 Jesus comparison because he represents just that much. He represents that much mythology and icon status.
Do 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 do.
I'm glad I was able to convince you of the R2D2 S tier.
Okay, well, next one up. Let's get it out of the way. Darth Vader.
Oh, this is going to be a complex. We talked about Anakin a lot. The focal point, one of the most recognizable villains in entertainment history. We got to give him S tier, right? Just based on the memorability alone.
Yeah, like
Not to
R2D2, just
mention
super
the
iconic. Although not as smooth a character, he's definitely a lot more interesting. He's
what do
basically
you mean smooth?
well, R2D2 is kind of like he's like this perfect, self-contained robot, whereas Darth Vader has some issues.
Well, I think a good character should have issues, which makes him more
No,
perfect.
I'm saying it's a different style of appeal, but he isn't this like
It's the appeal you need. It's the appeal you need in the movie.
it's a
Linchpin
more
emotional.
it's a dramatic appeal. I mean, he's not this cookie cutter sort of perfection product like R2D2, but he is a like a human being with as many flaws and as he does has strengths. And
And he was in 13 minutes of the original movie and instantly became one of the most famous things in the entire world. Um, and then the fact that they expanded on it and I Am Your Father, one of the greatest twists in movie history. I mean, yeah, all of that,
well,
all of
yeah,
that.
and
Cool.
this idea that you need to have a character be in a movie like so in so many scenes is ludicrous. I think that there's nothing you really need to say about Darth Vader that hasn't already been said, and especially while justifying his position in S tier, he is kind of the main character in Star Wars. Like he
Yep,
really
he's the main
is.
character.
He literally is in the prequels, like because Anakin's the main character. But even in the original ones, he sort of effectively is. I mean, I guess if you watch them toe to toe, Luke would
Well,
still sit.
George Lucas has always said Darth Vader's the main character, even with Luke Skywalker. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
and people
yes
people
and
can
no.
disagree. People can disagree with George Lucas
Yeah,
on that.
yes
I
and no.
agree with him.
I
Agree
think
with
I
him.
think if before I think if you watch the originals, it doesn't really seem like he's the main character. But if you someone said, "Well, I think he's the main character," I could see in like a cosmic sense how it's true. But like I think when those movies were made, it was
Yes, within the context of, I mean, Anakin was definitely the main character.
in the prequels,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. But that's not
um,
controversial. But
yeah,
I think it's controversial whether or not he's the main character in the original trilogy because he wasn't in it that much, and he those movies were a lot older, and you really don't. He's not. He's just he's a looming, somewhat nefarious
well, the fact that you can
villain.
even have this conversation about is the story really about him or not just adds to how compelling he is.
And
And the whole time
he's
he's
got
one of the most
incredible
famous.
interactions like when he like fucks up Han and Cloud City Bespin.
We would be honored if you could join us.
Yeah,
He
I mean he's
force pulls his blaster from him.
yeah, and that's where you realize that was just essentially where you realize that he was actually a super powerful individual, not just sort of like a paper tiger, glass cannon,
Right, right,
or
right.
some sort of just like lumen
I know
lumen
it's like the
dude.
same thing with Obi-Wan, right? Like you
He
don't
wasn't
know
just
how powerful
well, yeah, like I
powerful
mean,
these characters
it's
are.
he seemed a little bit like he was some sort of like he was like Ghostface from Scream or something. Like he just was a creep.
Right, exactly. And and I think the coolest part about Darth Vader is he doesn't have to do much, and he's the baddest
Oh
man in
yeah,
town.
he doesn't
I
have
mean,
to move a
he
finger.
beats pretty much everyone on the list other than like Yoda and Palpatine. Um,
Well, okay, so
so
this is the
he beats
linchpin.
Grievous. He destroys Grievous. He destroys Dooku. He
So
destroys
this is
Maul.
the fulcrum of this discussion. I think is when he fights Ben Kenobi in A New Hope, and Ben Kenobi sort of relinquishes to the supremacy of Vader. Do you think that Ben Kenobi did that entirely on purpose, or do you think he really was tapped out?
I think Obi-Wan knew that it was his time, and I don't think so. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi show made by Disney, Obi-Wan beats Darth Vader. That's pretty much complete cap. Basically, Darth Vader's a super emotional guy, and I think you could take advantage of that. Obi-Wan could definitely take advantage of that, but Obi-Wan should never meet Darth Vader in his suit before when he meets him in the Death Star when Darth Vader finally kills him. So I think with all of that being said, with just Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in that moment, with all the history they have in the original movies, I think that I think at that point,
Yeah.
Obi-Wan was I think Obi-Wan was wiser and stronger in a different way, but I think Obi-Wan overpowering Darth Vader. I think it was definitely possible. I think it's definitely possible. Obi-Wan definitely had the capability to do that because him and Darth Vader are kind of two sides of the same coin. Um, so if there was going to ever be a guy to beat Darth Vader, it'd be Obi-Wan Kenobi, other than the top of the heap, Palpatine and Yoda. Um, but I think in that moment, not only was and you were saying the overwhelming might of Vader,
You don't
but
think you don't think
not
Mace
just
Windu could have defeated Anakin Skywalker before he was
Mace
born?
Windu. Yes, yes, okay, yes, because Obi-Wan beat Anakin, right? And I think Anakin was overconfident. So I think Anakin was always a slave to his own potential, and I think never achieved his full potential. And I think him in the Darth Vader suit was as strong as he was ever going to be, and as close to him being Darth Vader as him stronger than Anakin. Definitely. But not only that, I mean, Vader had the might of the Empire behind him. They were surrounded by Darth Vader's control.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan was surrounded by the might of the Empire. Darth Vader represented the Empire, the failure of the entire society and galaxy. So I think Obi-Wan couldn't win that fight, just on like a fundamental level because Darth Vader had Darth Vader already lost. It's like a deeper level. Like Darth Vader lost everything already. Obi-Wan lost everything already. Darth Vader just happens to have the power. So and Obi-Wan Obi-Wan does too, but I mean, he just had. I think when those two clashed, I think the right thing to do was not to overpower this guy because that would defeat the entire purpose. I think the point was, I think the point of it was to sacrifice, because if Obi-Wan was to overpower Darth Vader, that morally that wouldn't fix anything, and I think Obi-Wan knew that, and I think on a mental level, Obi-Wan was in control pretty much the entire time and had Darth Vader's fucking number pretty
So,
much, and overpowering him wasn't in the cards. But it could have happened. Yeah, Obi-Wan could have beat him, definitely.
wow. So you think that even at that advanced age, without the suit, he could have slain Vader in that context?
Do you think if Darth Vader wasn't in the suit?
No, I mean, you think Ben Kenobi could have slayed Vader on the Death Star?
Yes, absolutely. But just because they, and we've seen Count Dooku, we know how powerful a Jedi can be at any age, or a Sith or a Force user. But I think it was so much deeper than that. And the real win was to obviously. I mean, Obi-Wan knew it. Obviously, the sacrifice was the real win. But to overpower him would prove nothing, and just leave everyone with
By the
just
way,
meaningless feelings.
I really like the fact that Obi-Wan retires from his name of like Obi-Wan. He changes his name to Ben, which is just like the most basic white dude name.
In a Clone Wars episode, Obi-Wan is like doing some undercover work, and his code name is Ben, and he's still working for the Jedi and stuff.
That's funny.
And he's doing undercover work. He's like, "Yeah, this is Ben. This is Ben."
So it's very funny. I didn't. Okay.
And the Disney show that tried to represent Obi-Wan in this time is not accurate at all.
I'll have to watch it and laugh painfully.
Not only does the plot not make sense, I mean, it's just it's so forced. Every part of it is forced.
That's kind of almost like it's almost meta now. Like you're almost watching it, laughing at their inability to make a good show.
Well, it's also not entertaining at all. Basically, they have 4 Sith Inquisitors, which are great additions to canon. They all have double lightsabers. They're basically agents of the Emperor, and they never have a single lightsaber fight. They just stand around and say really stupid things. Oh, it's very embarrassing.
It sounds like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Okay, well, at any rate, I will say one thing about Vader that I don't think you touched upon was that when I first saw Star Wars, I think the only thing that really made me intrigued by it was Darth Vader. I think everything else when I first saw it was sort of like something you could see in another movie, maybe. But Darth Vader, the enigma. He was a totally elusive, mysterious figure. And I'd never seen that done in a movie at that tender age, and I don't think I've seen it since then. And I think it was all encompassing in my imagination for like a week, right? Like I was like probably obsessed with this figure of Darth Vader, and I can't remember any film that's done that. Of course, I can point to something that's gotten close, like Lord of the Rings with Sauron or something, but that's all kind of riffing off Darth Vader anyway. So, yeah, I mean, it was never a question to me that Darth Vader would be on the top of any tier list. In fact, I think he is the most important character in the series, and he's a character that I probably criticized the least in my life.
Yes. I mean, what other movie has a character with like a mask on like that? Jason Voorhees. Like what other?
Well,
is that it? Michael Myers,
Ghostface, Jason Voorhees. Yeah, I mean those are horror movies though, and those are all those movies came after Star Wars. So it's
exactly. So the fact that Darth Vader is kind of such a horrific figure in the fact that you can't see his face. And the reason you can't see his face, like it's not like you could just take his mask off. I mean, every layer, there literal layers, the suit and what's under the suit. Every layer to Darth Vader is full of every sort of compelling character trait that any character would ever need to be emotionally resonant. It's powerful on the outside, it's powerful on the inside, and all you need to do is see the outside, and it makes you question a lot of things. Uh, and a lot of figures in entertainment media have not had the effect on the public than Darth Vader has. And you could be a huge Star Wars fan to see that, or you could just be someone that sees Darth Vader for the first time and say, "Why is he wearing a mask? Like, what does that mean? Um, how deep does that go?" The purpose of these kinds of things. And say what you will about the prequels and how all of that unfolded anyway, but where Darth Vader ends up, um, to get to the point where Darth Vader starts, um, done over the course of the creation of like 45 years of mythology. Nothing really rivals Darth Vader, um, on most of the levels, pretty much every one of the levels. Despite any drawbacks from the prequels, I think you could look at it and just see how meaningful it is. Just just on the mask alone, and every other trait that makes Darth Vader what he is. Not to mention that you think it's some evil figure, but it's also a father. A
Well,
father looks like that.
he they have a lot of movies where the father and the son have a strained dynamic that needs recourse and or recompense or resolution. But this movie, I think, is the best movie to showcase the craziness of a father-son relationship. And it's
A whole
almost
nother level.
a
On a
whole
whole
nother
nother
level,
level.
yeah. And it's frightening actually how effective it was. But yeah, I mean that's the magic of
And the
cinema.
fact that he was saved in the end by his son. I mean,
Yeah.
someone who looks like literal death, someone who looks like the embodiment of death, to be saved by their son like that. I mean, that's as
Well,
good as it gets right there.
you'll notice that when he takes his mask off, he still looks a little bit better than the Emperor. He's still like a little bit more handsome. It's kind of funny.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, you're kind of right. You're kind of right. And the Emperor gets points docked from him because you can see his face, because he's just all evil. So we can talk about the Emperor in
Okay,
a
so
second.
let's go on to the Emperor. Is he on this list? Oh, he might be inverted. I don't have his color on my screen. My screen's damaged. Let's just do. I'll just go with this logo or whatever it is, and we'll call it the Emperor. All right, the Emperor. What do you think?
Um, well, he's the reason that everything in Star Wars happens. He's basically a 5D chess player and orchestrated the Clone Wars, and killed 10,000 Jedi with the snap of his finger. Um, he did a galactic wide massacre, purge of an entire religion, and swept it under the rug like it was nothing. So, in terms of pure effectiveness, I can give him the S tier. He is also endlessly compelling, giving characters the greatest trial of evil that a character could ever go through. So he is the vessel through which characters can achieve greatness. And the fact that he established what he did within the mythology of Star Wars um, makes the triumphs over him that much more incredible to witness. And the fact that he has control over Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, the fact that he has control over Darth Vader, that you have this outside reason for that,
Yeah.
and it makes sense that it would be this being, this type of a threat. It just makes a lot of sense. It gives a lot of things a lot more context. And I think he fits into the Star Wars universe well. On an iconic level, I think I think a lot of people know of the Emperor. The Force Lightning, definitely. I think Force Lightning is very well known.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I want to say one thing about the Emperor before I go on my little diatribe, is that the Emperor is without a doubt an iconic, great character. Like there's nothing that will diminish his role in the Star Wars canon. He really is universally one of the most interesting, appealing characters. Now that said, there's a problem I have with him, which is that his success is based on also, I think, his weakness, and that is that he's this alluring, ancient order being that sort of creeps into the world from a decayed society of like devil worshipping aliens that like were like defeated centuries ago, millennia ago, and he's just like the last representative of their order. And then that's why he's able to like penetrate into the very nervous system of the galaxy and capsize the whole political structure, and then upend it and reversify it just based on his own like planning. I think that like that is so deranged that
It's scary.
it makes me, it may really kind of pokes a hole in the whole Star Wars thing a little, because it's like he is a scary character, no doubt. He absolutely, but could someone like, is it really feasible for a one-off person to sort of creep into all of like, he's not like he, I mean, he's literally supposed to be like a metaphor for the Illuminati, but it to me it feels more than that. It feels like he is
Cheney.
he kind of came out of Dick Cheney, yeah. He came out of nowhere though. Like, he was supposed to be like a Satanist, I suppose, and then he ends up
Beating everyone.
beating everyone, right? And I'm like, I don't know if I think it's a weakness as well as a strength that he does that.
Yes. Do you think that has an effect on people's views of his role in the Star Wars saga?
Well, I think it explains why he's always a miscreant, and I think so. It does, whether or not that it does in a highfalutin sense. I think it does in a literal sense, where he is sort of creepy crawly all the time. He's scheming and shadowy.
Do you think he has enough of an iconic status that Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia have? Because I think his role in the original trilogy, because Grand Moff Tarkin, you were talking about Grand Moff Tarkin, you don't have to know anything about him. Like, he fits into the movie perfectly. With the Emperor, you kind of need a lot of context. You kind of need a lot of context to understand where he comes from. And even if you don't need the context, and because the Emperor has done very well in the one original trilogy movie, I think the entire movie holds back a lot because there's Ewoks, and that's like very weird, and it's a little too silly, and it's a little boring. So the Emperor is kind of fitting into this context where audiences really only get glimpses of him and don't have enough information. Whereas with someone like Grand Moff Tarkin, it doesn't matter how important he is to the Star Wars universe. Like, you can just watch and
it takes me out, he takes me out of it sometimes, and it's because you'll notice that as the original films go on, he becomes a little bit more of like of like Vader's gimp in the way he interacts with, especially with Luke. Like, he does more talking, and he seems more like the sideshow compared to Vader. Whereas I think in A New Hope he was kind of the boss. And that being said, you're always very cognitively aware that he's the one in charge. However, he doesn't always position himself that way in the later films. Yeah, I mean, his dynamic is fine. I think his dynamic is excellent. It's just that when you're like, he doesn't have any family. I think the idea is you're supposed to presuppose that Vader is sort of maybe his family, if he has any. He doesn't really have like this sort of classic aristocratic sort of surroundings that an emperor would have.
He's a minimalist guy,
He's a minimalist.
He likes his imperial logos and calls it a day, Yeah. Well, you know what? He does have excellent views. So his palace is he set up his like desk office in the Jedi Temple. He's like, all right, the Jedi are fucking gone, so time to move in. New open vacancy. Got to move in. So he has a great view of Coruscant. So that's all the luxury you'll ever need in Star Wars. And then he has great views of space when he goes into space. So I think that's the luxury that you look at for that.
I mean, you know, it's
That's just a funny thing. That's just a funny thing. It doesn't really mean anything.
you know,
I think
he's
he's.
an example of a character where they made him. They started out with something sort of out of time, right? It was his in the original trilogies when they developed him, Lucas. He was a very like odd sort of, you know, old school villain, sort of thrown into some kind of world that didn't make immediate sense to anyone, and it worked because it was so strange. And then they did this amazing thing where they tried to like dial it back to him seeming like a normal human being when he was the actual like chancellor of the Republic of the Senate, right? They dialed it back with the prequel so that he looked like a totally normal representative of some place in the galaxy. So
So
so the
I
way
think his role in the movie, like, so I think in Return of the Jedi, you can have a lot of drawbacks and stuff and not have the full context and be a little confused. But I think, so in Return of the Jedi, I think what gives him a lot more credit is like the way he speaks to Darth Vader. That gives him a lot of, okay, this guy has a connection to this guy. And that's what the
it's more
audience sees.
visceral, I see. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but even Return of the Jedi, it's kind of, it's hard to follow that movie because it's very iffy. So it has to work on the original trilogy's merits. So I think the Emperor is less iconic for the original trilogy. But now I think what for the first example we have, I think the prequels really give the Emperor this effect on the audience where the audience can you really have someone to hate. You
Yeah.
really you really have someone where this guy is doing everything, causing all the
He
problems.
wasn't that vilified in the originals in that sense. He really was kind of
He
like
was just in one. Yep, he just kind of filled one role, and it was in one point in time, and you kind of saw the end of his story. And I think where the character was in the story to show the end of that story, yeah, it was good. He fit in. It fit the
oh no,
context
it
well.
made
I
it, it
mean,
was
especially with the
and that's
context.
what was so epic and sprawling was that he started out as this humble like senator who and then he became chancellor, I guess. And then he turns into a real menace, right? Phantom menace,
Mhm.
right? Real
It's
menace.
crazy where he starts. It's crazy where George Lucas
And
decided to start him.
and
So that's
then
very interesting and compelling.
and then he magically you know goes backwards and forwards in time and becomes this villain in like a whole different world, it seems, where he actually is, because the heroes in this world are the next generation. They don't know to even be afraid of him. It's like they don't have all the background where they should fear him, and so they're willing to go up against him because they don't know how scary he used to be.
Right, right.
And maybe
So when
he's
Luke,
he
so
maybe,
when Luke fights him, so what
yeah.
do you think of like when Luke finally confronts the Emperor? What do you think? How significant is that for the Emperor's character? When Luke confronts him and Vader confronts him, how significant do you think that is for the character?
Well, I think it does show you that that guy um he was never like he wasn't going to let Luke win. You know, like it shows you that he was insofar that I mean he seems a little dumb for trusting Vader at that point, but beyond that I do think he was they made it they make it a good case for it because in Revenge of the Sith he does the same thing and gets away with it, whereas in Return of the Jedi he doesn't get away with it because he probably you know he was overconfident, and I think personally he didn't get out that much in all his years of running the empire, so he probably didn't have a lot of opportunities to sort of like you know go wild and electrocute people. Um, at least not like you know people who actually challenged him.
What about the iconic status of it? Like
No,
how do you think audiences thought about the Emperor as Luke was standing up to him?
well, to me it's a metaphor. I think, and I think when I say this, I think it's you kind of get this
Do you
feeling.
think he stuck out as iconic
No,
from
no,
the
I'm trying to
original?
explain. I'm trying to explain. When you
Yeah.
see him electrocute Luke, it's a visual metaphor for the way that someone who's like you know not doing the dirty work would run the show in an actual empire, where he would be the mind of the operation and he'd be using his mental energy to fuck with people rather than using weapons and whatnot. So it's a very good visual metaphor for what an emperor would do. And so I think it does remind you how powerful he really is, even if it's like a totally behind the scenes lurking way. And yeah, that does upgrade his stature in the original trilogy context at that time. But from A to S, I mean, on S we have Grievous, Maul, Anakin, Mace Windu. I mean, we have, yeah, I would say probably S, because everyone in A does not seem above him. But I don't think
Yeah,
I think he's the worst of the best, if that makes sense.
definitely. Let's give him a little bit more clout here. So obviously, when you watch Revenge of the Sith, he is the perfect villain. Obviously, in the greater Star Wars context, he is literally the 5D chess ultimate perfect outscale, outplay everybody. So he is a perfect villain that completes his mission perfectly. Also, what gives him more clout is that the original actor that played him in the original movie was 33 years old when he played him as the decrepit
Yep.
elderly. And George Lucas brought him back as a 50-year-old to play the younger version
I
of
know.
that character.
I know.
Amazing, amazing, fun, crazy how that worked out. So he definitely gets more goat stats.
But
I forgot we put.
one
Well,
thing I gotta say about that though, one is that
I
that's how you knew that he was the bad guy, is it was the same fucking actor.
right, exactly. That helped even more so. And I forgot we put Grievous and Maul in S tier. Oh yeah,
Ian McDiarmid, right? Yeah. Okay, so we could wrap up the pod after we do Yoda and Jar Jar. Are you there? Are you there?
Wait,
Hello?
yep. Hello.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we have a lot of tertiary characters and from the original and from the prequels still to do. I don't think we have time for it. It's midnight where I am right now, literally midnight now, 12. And then AM 00. And then the other thing is there's all these characters from the Disney movies. So what I'm thinking is we could do a round two after we finish up late some other time after, and then right now we'll just do Jar Jar Binks and Yoda, the best and worst characters I think in the season.
Mhm. Okay, so Jar Jar Banks, um, obvious F tier, but I honestly think he's kind of funny. But I don't know why I think that, but like literally when I watch the Phantom Menace, I'm like I'll chuckle and I'll be like, why
Wait,
the
let me
fuck did
let me
I
let me
like
give
that?
you let me just tell you. I think for the second one we do, we should read up on all these tertiary characters a little, like just so that we have trivia to make it more interesting. Because on their own merit, I don't think they're that good. But
Gotcha.
I think if we just knew some like fun factoids about their development, we could have a really interesting podcast about them. And there's some ones that are important, like Kylo Ren, but it's just not a lot.
Kylo Ren's a terrible character. He's worse than Jar Jar Binks. Literally, I'm not even joking.
Well, we're not even talking about those movies yet, and
Nope.
for the first six, Jar Jar's the worst, Yoda's the best. Let's go Jar Jar first.
Jar Jar, I actually, for some reason, I find it funny. Not sure why, but for what he represented, like he represents, like, like how much hate can come out of Star Wars, and it sucks that a character could be so disliked, and the fact that that sucks means it's an F tier.
Yeah, he was the one thing that took me out of the movie the most. Even as a child, I had no idea what was going on when he was talking, and it really felt like the Star Wars was like playing some kind of prank on me. So, and even though he moves in like a funny, silly way, you still feel like you're totally taken out of the series, and you feel like you're in some kind of like music video that for like a reggae band. It didn't work. His background, his story, actually, his character's story isn't bad. Like his actual character story is probably one of the better ones, but the presentation is awful. The acting was really really all over the place and screwy. Not all, it was consistent, but it was just screwy. And he didn't really help out that much. I mean, I guess the best scene he had was in the pod racing. is when he was fucking around with he got his tongue zapped when he was pod racing, and then he couldn't talk. It's probably the best scene he had in the whole thing, and even that was pretty stupid. So I give him an F. I mean he's definitely
Yes.
memorable.
Yeah, he's definitely memorable. Memorable for being bad. So F. Sorry, Jar Jar.
I will say that he is so bad that he is good sometimes. I will give him that, but it's still, in terms of
I don't think
watching.
so. I don't think so. I think he's just like, I don't know why I find him funny, but like everyone hated him. I understand why everyone hated him. He sucks. Like it's yeah.
He does.
Oh, have you seen the new episode of The Mandalorian?
I haven't watched any Mandalorian.
So the actor that played Jar Jar Binks was brought back in The Mandalorian, and he plays a completely different role. Like he's not Jar Jar Binks; he plays a different character.
That's funny.
And it was
It's
and he
great.
plays this really amazing heroic character. It was really amazing to get redemption for that.
That's
actor.
ironic, dude. Total irony.
The Mandalorian is great Disney Star Wars. Everything else Disney Star Wars is pretty good. There's some good stuff.
And okay, so Jar Jar Binks is like he's like the comic relief character that never could. He basically is he's a meta joke character that was an insult by Lucas for some reason on this fan base. Anyway, we can wipe the slate clean. Now we have his sort of his opposite in every way, just about. Yoda, the one and only.
Yoda might be on a little bit of a different scale than Jar Jar Binks. I don't think we need to.
I mean, he could be
those
F depending on how sizist you are about green aliens, but
I guess they're put on the metric of a Star Wars character that is a interesting creature that either everyone loves or everyone hates.
yeah, I mean they're polarizing for sure.
Well, Yoda's polarizing in a good way, and Jar Jar in a bad way.
Exactly.
Yoda is S tier, of course. Just
Easy
based
S tier, probably
one of the most
least doubted S tier.
One of the most iconic mentor figures in all of fiction, and it was ingenious to make him a small little green frog and to tell kids around the world that penis size doesn't matter. I mean, regular size doesn't matter.
Size queen.
Yoda just proving that he can lift an X-wing out of the lake like that. Pretty much puts all of Star Wars into context.
I mean, imagine what he could do to a Ford F-150. You know, you do that to an X-wing.
Well, I think Yoda would understand that you need to respect the Ford F-150, so don't lift it up in the air. Let's just drive it. And Yoda would have we would tie some things to his feet. Or maybe he would just use the Force on the pedals, because Yoda's that much of a badass, so I think he would do that.
I do think that it made my year when Yoda drew his green lightsaber and fought Count Dooku in that cave on that weird planet whose name I can't remember, but it was Geonosis. Yeah, exactly.
Not to mention, and everyone forgets about this, when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting, which is the reason they got S tier, Yoda is fighting Darth Sidious at the same time in the Senate Council chamber. And that is one of the greatest things. If you like space fantasy, it's one of the greatest things you'll ever see in your entire life. Little green frog versus old man is one of the greatest things, and it's running concurrent to Obi-Wan versus Anakin, one of the best fights in fiction anyway. So
you're saying Dooku versus Yoda was really
no. Yoda versus Sidious.
Oh, you like that one? I thought that
everyone forgets that. So while Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting, at the same time,
that good though.
It was amazing. It was incredible. If you like fiction and you understand Star Wars and you get what George Lucas was going for with Yoda, then an old guy versus a green frog in the Senate chamber room while Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting on Mustafar is one of the greatest things there. One of the cleanest fades I have ever seen is when Obi-Wan's fighting Anakin and they're fucking each other up. They've been fucking each other up for like 6 straight minutes now. None of them, Obi-Wan's just giving ground. And then finally, like, like the music takes like a second, even though you know they're going to keep going for a long time, and the music changes to Duel of the Fates from the Phantom Menace, from the Darth Maul fight, and it cuts to the Senate chamber, and Darth Sidious is using the Force to throw the giant Senate pods at Yoda. So he's throwing like tons of these giant mechanical things at Yoda in one of the craziest science fantasy rooms you've ever seen. And the fact that they turned the political gathering thing in and just start tearing it apart with force powers with Yoda, I mean,
You like that?
it's completely underrated. Watch Revenge of the Sith again, and before the fight starts, Yoda insta kills two of the royal guards. Incredible.
Right? Yeah, that was cool. Badass.
Sidious electrocutes Yoda. For some reason, Yoda doesn't react at all, which is very silly. Yoda force pushes Darth Sidious into his chair, which is really silly. It's honestly so silly. It's honestly so bad.
Oh,
It's
I
funny.
see what you're saying. So that you're saying that I see because I associated that with the Senate throwing the seats around, but you're saying that preamble was what was bad, and then the actual throwing it around was good.
Yeah, the preamble was honestly like fine, like it was interesting. And then in the preamble, Yoda says like kind of some dumb things, but they're kind of cool. Yoda's like, if so powerful you are, why leave? Like, what the hell, Yoda? That's cool that you kind of said that. And then Sidious says one of the most interesting lines in all of Star Wars, which is so underrated. Sidious says, "You will not stop me. Darth Vader will become more powerful than either of us." And then Yoda's like, "You've misplaced faith in your apprentice, and you've misplaced your faith in the dark side. And now I'm gonna fucking kill you." And then they go to town on each other, not in sex, but they're trying to kill each other. It's completely underrated. Watch the entirety of Revenge of the
But
Sith, and you will see
Yoda kind of
Yoda
doesn't
versus.
hold his own that well. I mean, he gets kind of knocked around.
Well, actually, it's a tie. It's a tie, and because Palpatine pretty much has guards all over the Senate, Yoda really only, you take a shot at the king, you better not miss. Yoda took a shot at the king and ended in a standoff. And as soon as he lost the standoff, he had like hundreds of stormtroopers were coming in. So, it's just very interesting that George Lucas did that. You know how Sidious is like in Star Wars, he is the top of the bat. He represents pure evil, and Yoda represents pure good. And he finally had those two come together. So definitely give that fight in Revenge. And you're gonna if you want to watch Anakin versus Obi-Wan fight, then you're watching a green frog and the old guy fight. And if we're gonna give the Sidious a lot of credit, then you're gonna want to give Sidious credit for literally trying to fuck up Yoda. Like even if Yoda did get fucked up a little bit, you got to give Sidious credit for keeping him the
Yeah,
fuck
I
away
mean,
from
you're
him.
definitely making me think Sidious was cooler and making me regret doubting him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But then at the
mm-hmm.
same time, Yoda, I feel like Yoda really like in the prequels, he was sort of a joke, and then but like it was like a welcome joke because he was already so loved. Whereas in
I don't think
the
it was a joke. I think it was just jarring for people to see him jump around like that. And it was cool. You said that
okay,
you thought it was cool when he fought Count Dooku.
yeah, no, I think
And if
yeah,
you take that second look at the prequels, Yoda is a tragic character. He loses everything. He fucked up. He couldn't see the Sith coming. By the time he finally fought Darth Sidious already won. Um,
okay,
so
right on.
so it's just the prequels, the way George Lucas brought all the elements. The way that he brought Yoda with Darth Sidious, Anakin versus Obi-Wan. I mean, that's why it's the best the
I did.
best of
I
Star
also
Wars.
like that moment on Kashyyyk, right? The Wookiee
Kashyyyk, yep.
Kashyyyk, yeah. Dude, it's been so long since I buffed up on these, brushed up on these planet
Planet names,
names.
I got you. I got you with
I
every
used to
single
know
planet
all of
name.
them. I used to know them like perfect, and I just forgot so many.
Oh, that's so sad. I
Uh,
still know them all,
I
which is
know
also sad.
like probably at least half, but I forgot
Yeah,
like.
you probably know plenty. So it's sad that you forgot them, but it's also sad that I know all.
Oh well, yeah,
It's fine.
it's six of one, half a dozen of the other,
Double
right?
edged sword. Double edged
Exactly,
sword.
exactly. No, but I will say that on Kashyyyk, it was cool when the stormtroopers are like had Order 66 supposed to kill Yoda, and then he just like saw it coming. and he just fucking murked the
He's
one.
the only. He's like one of the only ones that's all good. A lot of Jedi survived Order 66, but obviously we had to
A
focus
lot
on
of
the
them did,
youngest.
however, all the ones that were in frame and all in the prequels died, so it felt like they all died.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, okay, it's 12:13. Let me see.
Yoda's in S2, and then I think
Yoda is. Oh yeah,
I think
I put him there immediately. Yeah, he's there.
we can wrap up. We can wrap up.
Okay, so orders of business. We're literally at 3 hours in 30 seconds and 35 seconds. We'll be at 3 hours.
We did a good job.
Wow, we went way longer than I thought we would. I thought we'd go for like an hour 20. So that's good. And thankfully, I actually got audio this time, which stinks because I had Game of Thrones and I'd lost audio for myself, and that was a pretty
Right.
good.
Yep.
That was a pretty fun one. I mean,
Unfortunate.
Game of Thrones is fun. Those are fun characters to review.
We could have just as deep, in-depth
You,
talks about Game of Thrones.
I should get you to. We should redo the one with Evan, and maybe we could have. Yeah, I think it'll be the first tier ranking one I've done with 3 people, so that'd be good.
Hopefully, I'm free. I'd be down.
All right, I'll send you a message. All right, hey man, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it. You've changed my mind on a number of points that I've been kind of you kind of healed me in a way. I'm gonna watch.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna watch a bunch of
Gotcha.
videos now that I probably are overdue. I'm gonna watch them.
Watch Revenge. Go ahead and watch Revenge of the Sith. You're gonna enjoy it.
All right, man.
I'm glad I could give some of my takes. I have a very refined Star Wars palette.
I will say one
not
thing.
to
I will
toot my
say
own
one
horn.
thing. I met George Lucas at his. I think I told you this.
Right, you told me.
And
Yeah,
I told him Revenge of the Sith was really good, and I always feel guilty about it because I didn't know if I believed it or not. And this conversation has like sorted out the kinks, hammered them out, and I feel like I can
I think
confidently.
you were really missing like Anakin. I feel like you weren't giving you didn't mention Anakin versus Obi-Wan a lot. Those are like some focal points that deserve all the credit and recognition within Star Wars. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
But I'm glad I could come in and just let a lot of the takes be known and just have the conversations with you. Really awesome. And you gave me a few new perspectives too that are really good, really positive perspectives.
well,
Awesome.
I think one of the least controversial things was the duels between Obi-Wan and Anakin. I think those could almost be their own movie if you just cut them out and put them into you can make a short movie just out of that. So
Well, they tried to with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and it was pitiful.
okay, all right, man.
Never
Well,
watched
I'll sell off. I gotta get food, and I'll talk to you later, man. It's been good.
Catch you, bro. Talk to you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.